I don't even know where to begin. But maybe that's the point of writing this, to try and explain something I can barely make sense of myself most days. I've never shared this in full before, partly because most people don't want to hear it, and partly because it's hard to find the words for something that feels so much bigger than language. I have schizophrenia, and I'm terrified almost all the time. If I were to say this out loud, people get uncomfortable. You can see it in their eyes when you tell them, or worse, when they find out on their own. Suddenly, you're no longer their friend, co-worker, son, or partner. You're that person with schizophrenia, unstable, dangerous, broken. And I get it. Unless you've lived it or watched someone go through it, it's almost impossible to understand. Even then, unless it's happening inside your own head, it's not the same. My story began when I was 19. At first, I thought I was just dealing with anxiety or maybe depression. I couldn't sleep. My brain raced from the moment I lay down until my alarm went off. But the thoughts didn't make sense. It was a loop of strange words, sentence fragments, and sometimes, voices. At first, the voices were quiet, like background noise. I told myself I was just tired or stressed from college. But soon, the paranoia crept in. I convinced myself people were following me, watching me. I'd walk into class and feel like everyone was staring or whispering. At first, I blamed it on self-consciousness. But it got worse. I started to believe my professors were trying to fail me, that my roommate was spying on me, that my phone was tapped. I couldn't shut off the thoughts, and I couldn't convince myself they weren't real, because in those moments, they felt real. Around 20, the voices got louder. At first, they weren't terrifying, just passive-aggressive, cruel little comments. "You're late again. Why do you even bother? Nobody wants you here." I thought it was my inner critic, until I realized it wasn't my voice. It sounded like someone else entirely. Eventually, there were multiple voices. They argued with each other, sometimes about me, sometimes about nothing at all. And then came the threats. I remember walking home from the library one night. The voices were so loud and angry, I literally ran all the way back to my apartment, convinced someone was chasing me. No one was there, but my heart wouldn't stop pounding. The fear was real, even if the danger wasn't. That was the first night I seriously thought about ending my life. I didn't tell anyone. For a long time, I tried to handle it alone, tried to push it down, pretend to be normal, but you can only fake it for so long. My grades slipped. I stopped going out. I avoided family. I was spiraling. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to scare the people I loved. But like anything hidden too long, it came to the surface. My breaking point came when I lashed out at my roommate, accusing him of recording my conversations. I was screaming, crying, completely out of control. There weren't recordings, but I was sure there were. He didn't know what to do. Neither did I. That's when my parents got involved. They pushed for me to see a doctor. The first time I heard the word schizophrenia from a professional, my world collapsed. Like most people, I had only seen it in movies or the news. I thought of dangerous, violent, unpredictable people, monsters. And now, I was being told I was one of them. But I wasn't violent. I wasn't dangerous. I was just scared. The hardest part wasn't the diagnosis. It was everything that came after. The medications with awful side effects. The endless appointments, therapy sessions that felt like going in circles. And through all of it, the voices didn't just disappear. Sometimes the meds helped. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they made me feel like a zombie. No fear, but no joy either. Soon after the diagnosis, the losses started piling up. People I loved began to drift away. Friends didn't know how to deal. Some were scared. Others just gave up. Only a few stayed, and I will love them for that. But most couldn't handle it, and honestly, I don't blame them. Dating? Nearly impossible. Who wants to date someone who might wake up at 3 a.m. screaming? Who wants to fall in love with someone constantly terrified of losing control? You start to think you're better off alone, that it's safer for everyone if you just keep your distance. But it's so lonely. And then there's the shame, the kind you never talk about, the kind that sits heavy on your chest. You start to feel like you're broken, defective, guilty for simply being alive, because you see what it does to the people around you. Your parents, your siblings, your few remaining friends. Every time you call them in the middle of a breakdown, every time you cancel plans because you can't leave the house, every time they have to reassure you that no one is spying on you. The voices, they aren't real. The suicidal thoughts, they don't go away. They ebb and flow like the tide. Some days I'm okay. Others, it feels like the weight might crush me. There's a war in my head, not between the voices, but between the part of me that wants to keep fighting and the part of me that just wants peace. What keeps me here? Honestly, guilt sometimes. I think about what it would do to my mom if I gave up, how my dad would be the one to find me, the pain it would cause my little sister. I don't want to be another tragedy for them, so I stay. I fight, even when I don't want to. And that's exhausting. People don't understand how terrifying schizophrenia really is. It's not just voices or paranoia. It's feeling like your mind is turning against you. It's questioning everything. Did I really hear that? Did that person actually look at me? Was any of that real? And when you try to explain it to others, you see it in their eyes. The discomfort, the fear, the judgment. You get tired of explaining, tired of trying to make people understand something that barely makes sense to you. I've had close calls, hospital stays, attempts that thankfully didn't work. And yet, I'm still here. I'm here because somehow I've held on, because some people didn't leave, because some doctors didn't give up, and because sometimes, just sometimes, I get to laugh and feel almost normal again. I'm here because even though schizophrenia has taken so much, I'm not ready to let it take everything. Writing this is terrifying. Admitting all this is terrifying. But maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe someone needs to know that they're not alone, that even when it feels hopeless, they're not broken beyond repair. I'm not cured. Schizophrenia doesn't have a cure, and there may never be one in my lifetime. But I'm trying. Every day I try again. Some days that means taking a shower. Sometimes it just means staying alive. That counts too. If you're hearing this and you don't struggle with mental illness, I hope maybe now you understand it a little better. And if you do struggle, if you've heard the voices, felt the paranoia, carried the shame and the guilt, just know you're not alone. For me, writing this today was part of my fight, because sometimes simply being here is the biggest victory of all.
I am a horrible mother. I wish my son would die. That's a sentence I never thought I'd write, nor even allow myself to think. But here I am, sitting alone with tears in my eyes, putting these words out into the world because I can't hold them inside anymore. I am a mother of 3. I have 2 sons named Alex and Cameron who are beautiful, kind boys. They are smart, funny, caring. They look out for each other and have always made me proud. If you met them, you'd understand why I believe they'll grow up to do great things in this world. They're good boys. And then there's Ben. Ben is my middle child. He's 14 now, and for most of those years, I've lived in fear of him. I should probably start from the beginning. Before Ben was born, I was married and happy. I had just given birth to Alex, and like many women, I was trying to lose the baby weight, get my body back, feel like myself again. So I took up running. Early mornings or late evenings, quiet neighborhoods, trails. It was just me and my headphones pounding the pavement. It was supposed to be peaceful, but that didn't last long. One night while jogging on a trail, I was attacked. I won't relive the details here. It still feels like swallowing shards of glass every time I think about it. But I survived. The man who assaulted me went on to rape at least half a dozen other women before he was finally caught. That man is behind bars now. I faced him in court, saw his face. I know the monster he is. But by the time they caught him, I was already pregnant. The timing of my pregnancy raised a terrible, unspoken question. Was this child my husband's or my attacker's? There was no easy answer. The timelines overlapped just enough that I couldn't be sure. My husband and I discussed a paternity test. We debated it for months. My husband, bless him, was supportive. He said, "It doesn't matter if this baby is yours. He's mine too." Part of me wanted to know, but another part didn't. What would I even do with that information? Would it change how I felt about the child? Would it change how my husband felt? Would it poison everything? Honestly, back then, I still clung to hope. Hope that nurture was stronger than nature, that love could conquer genetics, that this child I was carrying, no matter whose blood ran through him, would grow up in a good home with 2 loving parents and be just okay. So we never did the test. I carried Ben to term. I loved him the second I held him, and for years I treated him no differently than my other sons. He was my baby. I held him, rocked him, kissed his soft head. I celebrated every birthday, every first step, every milestone. I was determined to love him just like I loved Alex and would come to love Cameron. And I did. But things started to feel different. Subtly at first, but more noticeable over time. As a toddler, Ben had no trouble with his older brother. They played like brothers do. But whenever he was around younger kids, at playdates, playgrounds, daycare, a pattern emerged. He would get aggressive, cruel even. He'd snatch toys, knock other kids down, twist their arms. Not like a typical toddler tantrum. It felt calculated, like there was a coldness inside him. At first, I tried to chalk it up to boys being boys, testing limits, needing discipline. So we disciplined him. Timeouts, loss of privileges, even therapy at a young age. But nothing changed. It only made him more subtle. He learned to hide it better. By age 7, we were drowning in red flags. He would lie, steal, and was honing his skills at manipulation. We had to get rid of a puppy after he deliberately hurt it. I cried for days after that, and so did my husband. Not just for the dog, but for what it told us about our son. We got him into more therapy. Consulted specialists and doctors. Diagnoses piled up. Conduct disorder, oppositional defiant disorder, callous unemotional traits. No one said it directly, but I heard the words they wouldn't say. Sociopath, psychopath. By elementary school, his teachers dreaded him. One first-year teacher called me sobbing, saying Ben taunted her, destroyed posters, ripped books, ruined other kids' class projects. He never got caught directly, but everyone knew it was him. I wanted to defend my son. I wanted so badly to believe he was just misunderstood. But deep down, I already knew the truth. This wasn't just misbehavior. By middle school, calls from school became routine. Behavioral issues, bullying, fights, general cruelty. Then the worst call came recently. He shoved a girl against a locker in a hallway without cameras. He didn't even know her. The girl was terrified. When the school questioned him, Ben cried and acted devastated, saying he didn't know why he did it and that he was sorry. But once we were alone in the car, he dropped the act completely. He laughed about it, mocked the girl, even blamed her for overreacting. That is who my son is. That's why I live in constant terror. He's bigger and stronger than me now. When he has one of his rages, I can't physically control him. Sometimes I'm scared to be alone with him in the house. I hide knives, lock my bedroom door when I sleep. My husband works long hours, and I lie awake some nights wondering if I'll wake up to my son standing over me. I know what people think when they hear this. Why don't you get the paternity test? Why not just know for sure? Here's my answer. I don't need a test to know. I've already seen his biological father face to face. Besides the trial, I met him years later because I needed to confront him for my own sanity. This man was charming, handsome, educated, polite on the surface. But when I asked if he regretted raping me, he didn't flinch. "I regret getting caught," he said, smirking. That's my son. I'm scared that down the road I'll hear the same logic when Ben admits to doing something far more serious and irreversible than just shoving someone against a locker or destroying a project. I think Ben needs help. I know it, but I don't know what else I can do. I never dreamed I would be truly scared of my own son. But what do I do now?
I smoked crystal meth, and it was the most terrifying experience of my life. If you take anything from what I'm about to say, let it be this. There are experiences that shake you in ways you can't explain, no matter how hard you try. This was one of them. It's been about 8 days since it happened, and today is the first time I feel even remotely human again. I'm still not at 100%, but at least now I can sit down and tell this. I need to get it off my chest. Therapy isn't for a couple more weeks, and this isn't something I can talk about with family or blast all over Facebook. But I need to tell someone. So, strangers of the internet, today's your lucky day. I never thought this would be my story, not even close. But one bad decision doesn't always feel bad in the moment, and sometimes that's all it takes. It started like too many of my nights do, drinking heavily. Alcohol has always been my real vice. That's the gateway drug for me. I was hanging out at a friend's house, doing what we always do. Drinking, talking, killing time. And like too many nights before, I didn't know when to stop. By the time I left, I was deep in that blurry space where everything feels light and judgment goes out the window. I was supposed to head straight home, hop on a bus, call it a night. But then I ran into a couple of people I recognized. Homeless people. The kind most people avoid on the street. But I've been there. I've lived that life, even if I'm not in it now.
And in my foggy mind, that familiarity felt safe. So, when they invited me to hang out, I said yes. My guard was down. Honestly, part of me welcomed the company. We ended up back in their tent, just talking. That's when one of them asked if I wanted to smoke some clear. I knew exactly what it was, crystal meth. And for reasons I still can't explain, I said yes. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe the alcohol. But if I'm being honest, it was probably just my own stupidity. I handed over some cash, they loaded the pipe. The first few hits, I won't lie, they felt amazing. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Warmth spread through my chest. My mind felt sharp. I wasn't tired anymore. For a moment, I was floating, chatty, invincible. All my anxiety and depression gone, like they had never existed. But then, like flipping a light switch, it turned. The high faded, and something much darker crept in. This is what people get wrong about meth. The good part is incredibly short. What follows isn't a crash, it's a descent. The first thing I noticed was the heat. I was burning up. My skin was hot to the touch, and no matter what I did, I couldn't cool down. I was sweating. Thick, sour, chemical-smelling sweat. No soap could wash it off. I scrubbed myself raw at home, but the stench stuck, like a reminder of what I'd done to my body. Then came the worst part. It wouldn't stop. The high wouldn't end, but not in the way you want. I wanted it to end, desperately, but I couldn't sleep. For 3 days, I was wide awake, wired, and panicked. My body was exhausted. My heart was racing. My brain just wouldn't slow down. I tried Tylenol PM, hydration, lying still in a dark room. Nothing worked. The first 12 hours were filled with this intense, compulsive sexual energy, not in a pleasurable way. It was uncomfortable, overwhelming, and impossible to act on. I was too far gone. Then came the psychosis. I've been paranoid on weed before, during hangovers too. But this was like my brain was trying to break itself. Auditory hallucinations hit. Sirens, police radios, whispers right outside my door. None of it real. Then visual ones, shadows that weren't there, shapes moving in the corners of my eyes. I became convinced people were outside my window, spying on me. I kept yanking the blinds open, again and again. Every noise felt deafening. Footsteps, cars, voices, all twisted into one huge, terrifying delusion. I was clearly losing touch with reality. I called my roommate, twice, to tell him people were gathered outside our house. He humored me, he looked. He told me, gently, that no one was there. But my brain wouldn't believe him. It kept escalating. I tried walking it off, but every sound made me jump. Every passing car felt like a threat. I must have looked absolutely insane. Because I was. The world stopped making sense. Conversations felt imagined, faces distorted. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. Time blurred. I didn't know how long I'd been awake. Then the darkest thoughts came. What if this never ends? What if I've permanently broken my brain? That fear that I'd done irreversible damage, that was the worst part. Even after 72 hours, when I finally crashed and slept nearly a full day, I didn't feel better. I was groggy, my hands shook. The hallucinations were gone, but I still felt them. I kept replaying everything, the sweat, the panic, the terror. It took 4 more days before I felt somewhat normal. Even now, I feel off, like my brain is still trying to reset itself. And the scariest thing? I know it could have been worse. If I'd smoked just a little more, if I'd gotten into a car, trusted the wrong person, I don't know if I'd be alive right now. I haven't even talked about the guilt, the shame. I knew how dangerous meth was. I knew. And I still said yes. I risked everything, my health, my life, my sanity, on a stupid, split-second decision. That moment, handing me the pipe, I can't stop replaying it. It haunts me. I don't know what it is about alcohol that keeps putting me in situations like this, but I know I can't keep living like this. That's why I signed up for outpatient rehab. Not just for the meth, because God knows I'm never touching that again, but for the drinking that got me there in the first place. If I hadn't been drunk, I don't think any of this would have happened. You always hear how dangerous meth is, the stats, the mugshots, but you never hear how bad it is for a first-time user. I had no idea. I thought one night would just be one night. Instead, it nearly unraveled me. And the worst part? I don't even feel lucky. I just feel stupid, like I dodged a bullet I fired at myself. There's a version of me that didn't survive this, a version that snapped, overdosed, or broke something inside forever. That version nearly existed. I'm not proud of any of this, but I needed to get it out. I don't have the strongest support system, and instead of letting this rot inside me, I'm sharing it. Who knows? Maybe someone will drop a piece of wisdom in the comments. Or maybe I'll stop someone else from making the same mistake. One decision, one night, that's all it takes to change everything. Trust me, I know.
Tragedy has a way of finding people who are simply trying to put their lives back together. People who faced struggles, made mistakes, but are finally working towards stability. And yet, in a single instant, everything can be ripped away in ways that are almost impossible to comprehend. That's what happened to Gregory Biggs, a man trying to rebuild, a man who had no idea that his final moments would come in one of the most horrific, heartbreaking, and frankly, unimaginable ways you'll ever hear. In 2001, Gregory Biggs was 37 years old, living in Fort Worth, Texas. Life hadn't been easy for him. He had struggled with mental health issues, including schizophrenia, which made it difficult to hold steady work or maintain stable housing. He was homeless at the time, but not hopeless. He was doing what so many people in his position try to do: work his way out. Gregory had a skill. He was a trained mason, proud of his craft, and using it to try and rebuild his future. He was staying at a local shelter, picking up odd jobs where he could, working hard to piece his life back together, one brick at a time. His focus was simple: survive today, build for tomorrow. But for Gregory, tomorrow never came. In the early morning hours of October 26, 2001, Gregory was walking along the side of a dark stretch of highway in Fort Worth. He wasn't doing anything wrong, not interfering with traffic, not in the road, just trying to make his way back to the shelter or wherever he was staying that night. At the same time, 25-year-old Shantae Mallard was leaving a party. She had been drinking heavily and using drugs. Impaired, she got behind the wheel of her 1997 Chevrolet Cavalier and sped down the same road where Gregory was walking. She later claimed she never saw him. Or maybe she did and just couldn't react in time. The impact was brutal. Her car struck Gregory head-on. The collision threw him onto the hood and into the windshield, shattering the glass, embedding his body halfway inside. His legs remained outside the vehicle, while his upper body was lodged through the windshield. He was severely injured, but still alive. This is where the story takes a horrifying turn. Most people, even in a panic, would stop, call 911, and beg for help. But Shantae didn't. Instead, she drove home with Gregory still stuck in her windshield. Her house was just a few miles away in a quiet residential neighborhood. She pulled into her garage, closed the door behind her, and left him there, bleeding, dying. Instead of helping, she left Gregory trapped inside the car while she went inside. He didn't die instantly.
That's part of what makes this so gut-wrenching. He was conscious. He likely knew what was happening. According to later court testimony, Shantae checked on him more than once. She even apologized to him. But still, she didn't call for help. She let him suffer alone until sometime around daybreak when Gregory finally bled out and died. Then, instead of calling the police, Shantae made things worse. She called 2 friends and asked for help covering it up. Together, they dumped Gregory's body in nearby Cobb Park, treating him like trash, a problem to get rid of. Days passed. No one knew what had happened. His body was discovered by a passerby, but police had no idea who he was or how he ended up there. It looked like a typical hit and run. No leads, no witnesses, no answers. The case might have gone unsolved, if not for a tip months later. Someone who knew Shantae finally came forward. What they said was shocking and matched the evidence exactly. When investigators searched her garage, they found the car with the broken windshield and Gregory's blood, hair, and tissue still embedded in the shattered glass. There was no denying it. Shantae was arrested and charged with murder. The case gained national attention for how shocking and cruel it was. Even seasoned investigators were stunned, not just by the accident, but by what Shantae chose to do afterward. As one lead prosecutor put it, the only reason Gregory Biggs died is because she didn't call for help. He would have survived. And that's the most painful part. Gregory likely could have lived. His injuries were serious, but not fatal. Medical experts testified that if he'd received care right away, he would have had a strong chance of survival. Instead, he spent his final hours in unimaginable pain, listening to the woman who hit him moving around inside her house, while he slowly died in her garage. At trial, Shantae's defense claimed she had panicked, afraid of being arrested for driving under the influence. But the jury didn't believe that fear justified what she did or what she failed to do. They heard from medical personnel, first responders, and Gregory's family. The picture was clear. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was deliberate neglect. Shantae Mallard was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. She will be eligible for parole in 2027. For now, she remains behind bars for one of Fort Worth's most disturbing crimes. Gregory's family was left to mourn the loss of a son, a father, a man who never got the second chance he was fighting so hard for. His mother, who believed he was finally finding stability, was left with a nightmare no parent should ever have to endure. She spoke at Shantae's sentencing. Her words were full of grief, but also heartbreak at how preventable it all was. There's something especially cruel about how Gregory died. Not just the violence, but the hours that followed. Hours where one phone call could have saved his life. One act of decency. One moment of courage. But instead, what he got was abandonment. Stories like this stay with you because they feel so unnecessary. A man taking small, hopeful steps forward, robbed of everything. Not by fate, not by chance, but by selfishness and a total lack of humanity.
Personally, I find something deeply peaceful about the great outdoors. I'm not an extreme adventurer by any means. In fact, I'd much rather sit back and admire the beauty of nature than challenge it myself. I even find joy in watching videos of people exploring forests, mountains, and remote hiking trails. For me, seeing others immerse themselves in nature is both inspiring and humbling. I admire it because I'm fully aware of my own limits.
and roughing it has never been my strong suit. That's why the story of Storm Duel, also known online as Storm Outdoorsy, resonated with me so much. Born and raised in Harrodsburg, Belgium, Storm developed a deep bond with nature early in life. By his late teens, he'd spent countless hours camping alone, hiking, and pushing his boundaries out in the wild. He launched his YouTube channel in August of 2024, and within just a few months, built a modest but dedicated following of about 10,000 subscribers. What set Storm apart was his focus on quiet reflection. Instead of narrating his adventures, he let nature speak. His videos featured only natural sounds: water bubbling in a kettle, branches rustling in the wind, firewood crackling in the cold. He didn't chase adrenaline. He sought simplicity and connection. Each clip invited viewers to slow down and breathe. By the age of 22, Storm had become truly self-reliant in the wilderness. In past summers, he'd biked over 6,000 kilometers across Sweden, navigating remote terrain with confidence. He often posted photos of perfectly pitched tents lit by campfires or insulated pads nestled into snow, clear signs that he knew exactly what he was doing. In late October of 2024, Storm planned what was supposed to be a short, simple trip. He packed up his essentials: a lightweight tarp, sturdy boots, layered clothing, a compact cooking kit, and an Osprey backpack, and drove north to a remote area near Jokkmokk, Sweden, more than 60 miles above the Arctic Circle. Before setting out, he messaged his parents, letting them know how he was doing and describing the current weather. At the time, everything seemed normal, but looking back, his parents likely see that message differently now. That evening, the weather around Storm took a sudden and dramatic turn. Temperatures plunged to -10 degrees Celsius, 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and a fierce blizzard swept in, with winds reaching up to 120 kilometers per hour. Wind chills dropped even lower, well below -18 degrees Celsius. Storm recorded his evening in short videos, which he sent to a few loved ones. In one clip, he calmly told his grandmother, "It's snowing heavily out here, but don't worry, I'll survive, you know?" He sounded steady, as though he believed it. In another video sent to a friend, he aimed his camera at his snow-covered camp and said quietly, "Tonight, it's going to get worse. Jesus Christ." Around 2 a.m., Storm called Swedish emergency services. He reported that he was injured and needed help, but conditions were too dangerous. Rescuers couldn't reach him. Helicopters were grounded, and road crews couldn't make it through the storm. Storm made it clear that he needed help, but nature had closed every path to him. At daybreak, when the weather finally calmed, a rescue team flew in using the GPS coordinates he'd provided. But when they reached his campsite, Storm wasn't there. Search teams spread out and quickly found boot prints leading away from camp. After tracking them for just over a kilometer, they found Storm's lifeless body in the snow. He had collapsed on a trail leading towards his car, which was still about 14 kilometers away. It appears that he'd left the slight shelter of his camp and attempted to walk back to safety, but he didn't make it. Storm had suffered severe hypothermia. His lower legs and feet were frozen, and he had a fractured nose, likely from a fall. Hypothermia often causes confusion, poor judgment, and physical collapse, and that's almost certainly what happened. He was declared dead shortly after rescuers reached him. Storm's passing deeply affected everyone who knew him, from his family and friends to the thousands who followed his channel. His mother, Elizabeth, shared that she couldn't stop imagining her son's final moments, alone, fighting for his life, hoping for help that never arrived. The family plans to return to the place where he spent his final night, once weather allows. They hope to retrieve Storm's belongings, including his camera, to see nature one last time through his eyes. Storm Outdoorsy's channel is still up on YouTube. His videos are still there. Quiet mornings by the fire, soft footsteps in the snow, the occasional passing storm. Watching them now feels haunting. He shared his love of nature without fanfare, and although his final video has become a kind of memorial, where fans leave messages and say goodbye, the channel remains a tribute to his quiet spirit and the joy he found outdoors. His journey wasn't about chasing danger or breaking records. It was about connection, simplicity, and authenticity. Storm's final adventure reminds us nature is kind when respected, but dangerously unforgiving when you let your guard down, even for a moment. If you ever watch one of his videos, take a moment to absorb the quiet, listen to the wind through the trees, and remember, his journey wasn't reckless. It was real, it was human, and it ended far too soon.
Breakups are hard. Not just the emotional part of walking away from someone you once trusted, but everything that comes after. Dividing your lives, cutting off communication. And then there's that final, awkward step, getting your stuff back. Clothes, photos, a pet, those little pieces of a life once shared, still sitting in their place. It's something most of us go through at some point. It's nerve-wracking and uncomfortable, but usually it's the final task before a chapter closes. That's exactly what 28-year-old Bailey Faye Arlene Blunt was trying to do one afternoon in 2023. She set out to retrieve her belongings from her ex-boyfriend. But somewhere between arriving and leaving, something happened. Something no one can fully explain. And Bailey hasn't been seen since. Bailey lived in rural Humboldt County, California, the kind of place where towering redwoods line winding roads and small towns are scattered miles apart. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend. Her life hadn't been easy. She had struggled with substance abuse in the past, like so many do. But she was rebuilding. She was clean, working, and focused on creating a stable life for herself and her child. Her relationship with 24-year-old Tyler Burrow had been rocky. Tyler had a history of legal trouble, including weapons charges and troubling behavior, things that worried Bailey's friends and family. Over time, their relationship became toxic. There were arguments, reports of physical altercations, emotional abuse. Bailey knew she had to leave. But sometimes emotional ties keep us stuck longer than we should be. At that point, though, she was pulling away, bit by bit. Part of that process meant returning to Tyler's property to collect her things and finally close the door. On September 22, 2023, Bailey made the drive to Tyler's rural property off Berg Road near Highway 299. It was a secluded place surrounded by forest. No neighbors nearby, poor cell signal, little traffic. Just gravel, trees, and silence. At 4:38 p.m., Bailey sent a Facebook Messenger to her mother. It was short, blunt. Just 6 chilling words. "He's drunk and waving his gun around." That was the last anyone ever heard from her. No calls, no follow-up messages, no signs she needed help. Just that message, then silence. It's hard not to focus on that final message. In missing person cases, it's often the last contact that lingers in people's minds. But Bailey's message wasn't vague. It wasn't a cryptic goodbye. It was immediate, urgent, a snapshot of danger unfolding in real time. You can almost picture her, sitting inside or just outside the house, hands shaking as she types quickly, unsure what might happen next. She knew enough to reach out,
But after that message, the story unravels, and no one has been able to put the pieces back together. Bailey's mother saw the message and acted fast. She contacted friends, family, and police, hoping someone could get to her before it was too late. The Humboldt County Sheriff's Office got involved that same evening. Search teams rushed to Tyler's property with drones, canine units, and volunteers. They combed the dense forest around his home, looking for Bailey, her phone, anything. But from the very start, one thing stood out. Tyler wasn't there. By the time deputies arrived, he was gone. After Bailey disappeared, Tyler took her truck and her dog. He drove them to a friend's house nearby, left the truck parked there for 36 hours, then returned and drove off again. Early on September 24th, a license plate reader captured Bailey's truck in Redding, California. Later that same morning, it was spotted crossing into Oregon. Tyler was on the move, quickly putting hundreds of miles between himself and the place Bailey was last seen. It took weeks for authorities to track him down. Eventually, they found him camping in Trail, Oregon. He was still driving Bailey's truck, though by then he had spray painted it black, clearly trying to hide it. He was arrested, but only on unrelated weapons charges. Even in custody, Tyler never provided any useful information about Bailey's disappearance. To this day, no charges have been filed against him in connection with her case. His arrest brought some relief to Bailey's family. But that relief faded quickly, because while Tyler sat in jail, Bailey was still missing. And he wasn't talking. The investigation continued. Search teams expanded their grid, not just Tyler's property, but the remote land around it. Thick forest, steep trails, isolated terrain that made every step of the search slow and exhausting. Dogs returned. Drones scanned the most dangerous areas. But search after search came up empty. No remains, no clothing, not even her phone. It was as if Bailey had vanished completely. At the same time, investigators started building a clearer picture of her relationship with Tyler in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. What emerged was deeply troubling. Friends and family said Bailey had become scared of him. There were reports of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, and a growing obsession with guns. That made her final message all the more terrifying in hindsight. And yet, despite all of that, there still wasn't enough physical evidence to charge Tyler with anything related to Bailey's disappearance. Legally, he remains a free man in that regard. But to those closest to Bailey, it's hard not to see the situation as one-sided and deeply unjust. Bailey's mother has spoken publicly about her heartbreak and her anger. She's voiced frustration over how the case has been handled, saying she believes Bailey's past struggles with addiction led law enforcement to take the case less seriously. It's a painful accusation, but not an uncommon one among families of missing persons. Because no matter what Bailey went through in her past, she was a mother, a daughter, a human being who deserves to be found. And whether or not she's still alive, she still deserves for people to fight for her. As for Tyler Burrow, his cooperation has remained minimal. Law enforcement is still watching, so is the public. But without new evidence, the case has stalled. There have been no confirmed sightings, no credit card activity, no body recovered, no answers. It's now been nearly 2 years. Each day that passes makes it harder to believe she'll be found alive. And yet, her family still hopes. They continue searching. They continue fighting. They continue waiting. And all we're left with is that final message. A young woman sitting alone on a remote property, afraid, trying to protect herself and sending out one last cry for help. Then, nothing. Sometimes the cruelest thing about stories like this is that they don't end. They just stop.
This is going to take a while to explain, so stay with me. I promise it all comes back around. My very first car was a dark green 2000 Volkswagen Jetta. It was the most basic of basic when it came to cars. No options whatsoever, except for an automatic transmission. I bought it for $300. It was slow, beat up, missing a headlight, and drove straight only if the steering wheel was turned sideways. It puffed out a cloud of white smoke every time it started. Basically, it was every stereotype of a broke high schooler's first car. And yet, I loved that car. I drove it every chance I got. I don't think a single day went by that I didn't take it out. I named her Thunder Bunny. She was my baby, my beautiful green baby. But Volkswagens from that generation, especially Jettas, had a major flaw in the automatic transmission. I'm not exactly sure why, but the transmission would slowly get worse over time, until eventually the car just wouldn't shift into third gear anymore. And when that happened, there was nothing you could do. A couple of weeks after Halloween in 2019, I was going about 30 miles per hour when the engine suddenly roared and the car wouldn't accelerate. I feared the worst, and I was right. My dad, who's a mechanic, took one look at it and didn't even have hope. My baby was gone. So, much to my disappointment, we started looking for a new car. It only took a month for us to find her. A dark green 1999 Volkswagen Jetta, almost identical to my old one, except better in every way. She was faster, had heated leather seats, automatic windows, a sunroof, the works. Everything except an automatic transmission. But that didn't bother me. I had learned how to drive a manual, so it was perfect. I had a new baby. I went from the crackhead neighbor girl to Scarlett Johansson, at least in my eyes. I loved that car even more. I named it Little Boy, and I was happy. Now, on to the actual story, but there are a few more quick things I need to explain first. You can skip ahead if you want, but this part's helpful for understanding what happened. If you're not familiar with driving a manual car, here's something to know. You cannot leave it in gear and take your foot off the clutch, or the car will stall. So, if you leave the car in gear, you have to turn off the engine before taking your foot off the clutch. If you want to keep the engine running, you need to pull the handbrake, or the car will roll away. Now, guess what the only broken thing on my car was at that point? If you guessed the handbrake, you're right. So, I was working as a pizza delivery driver in a small but growing town in Michigan. The money was decent, but sometimes I had to deliver to very sketchy places. I even had a few shotguns pulled on me. One night, about 2 months ago, I was working a Friday shift. Fridays are usually busy, but this one had been slow. At around 8:30 p.m., half an hour before we closed, I got a delivery order. I jumped on it right away. It was 7 miles out, so by the time I returned, all the closing tasks would be done and I could go straight home. It was out in the woods, in a small lakeside trailer park neighborhood. Seemed like a good deal to me. I'm all about those. So I got into my car and started driving. When I pulled up to the house, I immediately got a bad feeling. The house was in one of those rural neighborhoods with widely spaced homes and likely a drug problem. It was completely dark. No porch light, no lights inside, nothing. There was one car in the driveway and an open window on the side of the house. I parked behind the car and sat there for a moment. Something felt wrong. Usually, even if the house is dark, there's a porch light or someone peeking out the window, some sign they're expecting a pizza, but this house felt
dead. Still, I put the car in gear, turned off the engine, grabbed the cheapest pizza we had, and got out. With my headlights off, I could barely see the house. The moonlight was the only thing giving me any visibility. I walked up the porch, past the big open window, and reached the front door. That's when I noticed it was slightly cracked open, just enough to see into the void of the house. Thinking of every horror movie I've ever seen, I said out loud, "Fuck that," and hurried back to my car. Now, I'm a tall, broad-looking guy, and in a hoodie, I probably look pretty tough, but in reality, I'm kind of frail. I could barely fight off a small dog. I got into the car and turned the engine on. The headlights lit up the front of the house. Almost instantly, the living room light behind the open window turned on, and a man stepped into view and walked toward the front door. I cursed under my breath and started weighing my options. If I went to the door, I might die. If I bailed, I'd probably get fired. That would mean no money for gas, no new car parts, no dates with my girl, just sitting at home doing online schoolwork. It was a stupid decision, I know, but I made my choice. I grabbed the pizza and opened the car door. I left the car out of gear so the engine would stay on in case I had to make a quick escape. I walked to the door, which the man had now opened fully. As I got closer, I got my first good look at him. I don't judge people by appearances, but this guy had a completely shaved head, was covered in tattoos, and was wearing gray jeans and a white tank top. He had a scowl on his face and was staring me dead in the eyes. I glanced into the house behind him. It was completely empty. When I started to open the pizza bag, I saw him reach around his waist. I froze. He looked at me with the most evil grin I've ever seen. I was sure I was about to die. They say your life flashes before your eyes. I thought about my girlfriend, that she'd never know what happened, that my boss would just assume I disappeared, that maybe my body would never be found. My dad would regret ever being proud of me for getting this job. Then I heard it, the sound of gravel under tires. My only pathetic shot at escape was rolling away. I didn't even turn to look. I just kept my eyes locked on the man. He looked past me toward the driveway. I finally turned my head. My car had rolled backward and come to a smooth stop near the mailbox. When I looked back at the man, his expression had changed. He looked nervous. He glanced back at me, scowled again, and slowly took his hand away from his waist. Then he reached into his front pocket and pulled out $12, handing it to me without a word. I gave him the pizza. He slammed the door shut. I ran to my car, nearly ripped the door off getting in, and looked back at the house. He was standing at the window, just staring at me. I floored it out of there, checking my mirrors constantly until I was back under streetlights. This was the scariest moment of my life. When I got back to the store, I told my boss. She called the police. Just like so many stories like this, we never heard anything more. I assume they went to the house and only found a small cheese pizza. Since then, I carry a knife with me everywhere. My boss is even thinking about adding GPS trackers to the delivery bags. Only recently did I realize something. This was a butterfly effect. I thought my car's broken transmission was the worst thing ever. I cursed Volkswagen for making such a terrible automatic transmission. But if that transmission had still worked, I would still have Thunder Bunny. That means when I got to that house, I would have put the car in park, and it would have just sat there, while whatever was about to happen, happened. To this day, I have zero doubt in my mind that man was planning to do something terrible to me. So, this is the story of how German engineering saved my life. I can only assume that when my car started rolling, the guy thought someone else was inside, maybe about to back up and pick me up. The engine wasn't revving, but if you're about to kill someone, you're probably not paying attention to little details like that. And that small, overlooked detail likely saved my life that night. I've always enjoyed reading about other people's strange encounters, but after diving down a rabbit hole of them last night, I feel like it's time I share my own story. It all started on my first day moving into student halls. I was greeted by a friendly guy named Dominic. He was flamboyant and told me early on in the conversation that he was gay, which I had no problem with. He offered to help me unpack and suggested we go for a drink afterwards. Although it felt a bit forward, I was glad to have made a friend so quickly and accepted. Dominic put a lot of effort into helping me organize my room, and then we headed to the student bar. During the conversation, I made it clear that I was straight. I suspected he might have a bit of a crush on me, which might explain how nice he was being, but he didn't seem bothered and just kept chatting like normal. I liked him. He was smart, interesting, and I was happy to have someone to talk to. I'd been worried I'd feel lonely in the dorms. He didn't live in my building, but just across the way. I was studying creative writing, and he was in business. We began hanging out a lot, but as time went on, I started to find him a little overbearing. He would constantly text and message me, and would get upset if I didn't respond, even if only 5 minutes passed. He always wanted to know what I was doing. Once, I told him I was on the train, and he replied, "Why are you on a train? Why wasn't I invited?" For context, I was headed to my part-time job. As I made more friends during the semester, Dominic became visibly displeased whenever they were around. He'd tell me he didn't like them and that I shouldn't trust them. He was becoming possessive, and I honestly can't stand clingy people. I tried to distance myself, but the more I pulled away, the more tightly he held on. I still cared about him, but I was starting to worry where this friendship was heading. I suspected he had a crush on me, and soon that suspicion was confirmed. I met a girl at a party named Anna and asked her out. She said yes, and I was thrilled to tell Dominic. But as soon as I mentioned it, his face fell. "Why are you going on a date with her?" he asked, almost sounding panicked. "Because I want to." "But I'm going to be jealous," he said. "Please don't go. It'll hurt me. You wouldn't want to hurt me. I'm your best friend." I had never told him he was my best friend. His behavior now was both annoying and creepy. "I'm sorry, Dominic, but I told you from the beginning I'm straight. Of course we're still friends, but I'm not going to stop dating for you." He stayed miserable the rest of the night. I figured he'd get over it. But while I was on my date with Anna, I started getting phone calls from unknown numbers. When I answered, there was just silence, like someone listening. The calls kept coming so often that I had to switch to airplane mode. The moment I turned it back off, the calls resumed immediately. Despite the creepiness, I had a good time with Anna, and we planned to meet again. When I got back to my dorm, Dominic was waiting outside with his phone in hand. "How was your date? Do you like her?" he asked, clearly upset. "Yeah, I do. Was that you who kept calling me?" "No," he said, but it was clearly a lie. Then he added, "I've been meaning to tell you, Anna's a total slut. She sleeps around with lots of guys. She's just going to hurt you." Anna and Dominic had no mutual connections. When I asked how he could possibly know that, he said he did his research. That crossed a line. I told him it wasn't his business and that I'd find out for myself. He started crying, said he was only trying to protect me, then stormed off. I didn't follow. Later, he sent me Facebook screenshots of an alleged conversation with Anna, where she supposedly said she was using me and planned to break my heart. But the whole thing felt fake. Why would she message Dominic, a complete stranger, and admit that? I demanded to see the conversation on his computer, but he claimed he had deleted it because it was too upsetting. That's when I knew he was deliberately trying to sabotage my relationship with Anna through manipulative lies. I told him firmly that I wasn't interested in him, never would be, and that he needed to stop. He claimed I was being a terrible friend and that I should trust him over some random girl. His selfish manipulation made me furious, so I blocked him on social media. But he kept texting and calling non-stop, saying things like he was so depressed he'd start using heroin or was thinking about ending his life, just trying to guilt-trip me. He also kept insisting Anna was cheating on me and that I had to wake up. He creeped me out so badly that I went to stay with my parents for a while. I had to block his number too, since the calls never stopped. Then, people from my dorm started messaging me angrily. Dominic had told them a twisted version of events, that Anna was some filthy, disease-ridden girl I had cheated on him with. Worse, he told everyone we had been in a romantic relationship and that I had broken his heart by leaving him for her. I was furious. I made it clear to everyone I had never been in a relationship with Dominic, and everything he said about Anna was complete nonsense. Most people believed me, but it took a while. Dominic was manipulative, and even though a lot of his lies were outrageous, he was disturbingly good at sounding believable. Eventually, I returned to the dorms. Staying with my parents during the school term was too inconvenient. That night, I got back late. I didn't want to run into Dominic. But despite having a new girlfriend and school to focus on, he was still stuck in my mind. And I think, in some twisted way, that's exactly what he wanted. Positive or negative, he just wanted me thinking about him. I lay down on my bed, trying to relax, when suddenly a brick smashed through my window. I dove off the bed and took cover, thinking someone might be trying to break in. Nothing else happened. Once I calmed down, I carefully stepped over the broken glass to look outside. Then I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was Dominic. "I just saw Anna throw a brick through your window and run. I told you she was bad news. You should have listened to me." The rage I felt is hard to describe. I screamed at him that I knew it was him and that I was calling the police. He protested, but I hung up and called the cops. When they arrived, Dominic wasn't in his room, but when it was opened, they found a large stash of illegal drugs. The dorm manager assured me he'd be kicked out. The police said they'd be in contact with him soon. I never saw Dominic again after that. I changed my number and never unblocked him. A few times I was tempted, just out of curiosity, but it wasn't worth it. If he wasn't expelled, I suspect he dropped out. I never found out what happened to him. My relationship with Anna didn't last. She never explained why she ended it, but I suspect Dominic's creepy behavior scared her off, although it wasn't my fault. Oh well, life goes on. Dominic, wherever you are, I hope you work through whatever issues you have, and I hope you find someone who actually wants to be with you, because no matter what your hopes were, it was never going to be me.
This story was originally shared on Reddit back in 2017. The original poster, OP, was around 14 years old at the time of writing, recounting an incident that happened when they were much younger. While their age during the event is mentioned, it's not clearly stated how much time had passed between the encounter and when the story was posted. I wanted to clarify this early on to avoid any confusion. Let's begin. It happened in February 2010. I was 7 years old, living in a quiet apartment complex not far from my school. My mom used to let me walk home alone. It was only a few blocks, and she trusted that I knew the way well enough. Nothing ever happened during those walks. I took the same route every day and was usually home within 10 minutes. But one day, things took a turn. As I was walking home like usual, a black car pulled up beside me.
I don't remember the make, but it looked old. The window rolled down, and inside was a red-haired woman who looked to be in her mid-40s. She smiled and introduced herself as Erica, claiming to be my dad's sister. Now, my dad had been out of the picture before I was even born. I didn't know much about him, but I did know one thing: he only had brothers. In fact, just a few days earlier, I had asked my mom if he had any siblings, and she told me, no sisters, all brothers. So I immediately knew Erica was lying. But instead of walking away or calling her out, I foolishly told her my name. That's when she started asking more questions: what school I went to, how my brother was doing. I started feeling uneasy. Something felt very off. I still remember that horrible gut feeling. I told her I wasn't supposed to talk to strangers and tried to walk away, but she kept her car moving alongside me, repeating things like, "Oh, honey, I promise I don't mean you any harm," in a friendly tone that somehow made it worse. Eventually, I broke into a run and headed straight for my apartment complex. I remembered something my older brother had once told me. If anyone ever followed me, I should run to our neighbor's door and pretend it was ours. Our neighbor, an older lady, was always home, and her place was closer than ours. So that's exactly what I did. When I reached the neighbor's door, I looked back and saw the woman still sitting in the car, just watching. Then she drove off. I didn't tell my mom. I was scared she'd stop letting me walk home alone, and that was one of the few things that made me feel independent. The next day, it happened again. Same car, same woman. But this time, she didn't just talk, she offered me a ride. I told her no and told her to leave me alone. Then I ran again to the neighbor's door. She followed me again. Just like the day before, I kept quiet. I don't know why I thought I could handle it on my own. I guess I didn't want to get in trouble or be seen as overreacting. That weekend, on Saturday, I was playing basketball with my brother in our complex when I saw her car drive by. I panicked and told him I felt sick so we'd go back inside. I didn't tell him the real reason. Then, on Sunday, after church, we pulled into the complex and I saw her again. This time, she was outside the car, just standing there. I remember she had a big belly and unusually small legs. The way she stood there watching us gave me chills. As soon as my mom parked, I ran inside. My mom and brother stayed in the kitchen to make lunch, and I went to the living room and peeked out the window. I saw Erica walk right up to the neighbor's door, the same door I had run to before. She knocked. I ducked out of sight. A few minutes later, our neighbor came over to tell my mom that a woman had come by her place claiming to be a teacher who needed to speak to me. No specific reason, just that she needed to talk to me. That's when I broke down. I started crying and finally told my mom everything. She cried too. I could see she was both terrified and furious. From that moment on, she said I could never walk home alone again. My 13-year-old brother would now have to walk with me every day. She also reported everything to the police. Both my neighbor and I gave statements. I remember being nervous talking to the officer, but also feeling a strange sense of relief. Maybe now this was finally over. For the next couple of months, anytime I saw a black car, I pointed it out to my brother, and we told our mom every time. But by April, things seemed to have died down. We never heard from the police again, and life slowly went back to normal. Years passed. I eventually stopped thinking about it. Until yesterday. I was leaving the grocery store with my best friend. Just a regular day. Suddenly, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around. It was her. She smiled and reintroduced herself. "Hi, I'm Erica." My jaw dropped. I was frozen, trying to stay calm on the outside, but inside I was freaking out. She offered me a ride again. I grabbed my friend's arm and said, "We need to go now." We walked away as fast as we could. Unlike when I was 7, this time I told my mom immediately. We went straight to the police. Thankfully, they took it seriously, and we filed another report. Update. I want to thank everyone who offered kind words and support. It truly helped. We found out who this woman is. She's been officially identified. Unfortunately, since she never physically harmed me, there aren't any criminal charges we can press. The silver lining is that I've now been granted a restraining order. It's already in effect. Hopefully, this is finally the end. I still don't understand why this woman felt so bold, why she approached me multiple times, years apart. The fact that she seemed to remember me is what chills me the most. I can only hope she hasn't done this to other children. But deep down, I'm afraid she has.
Back in high school, I was completely infatuated with my wife's best friend, Emily. Funny thing is, she couldn't stand me when we first met. She told people I was creepy, ugly, awkward, you name it. She never said it to my face, but I heard enough from classmates to know exactly where I stood. Still, I thought she was beautiful. Not just physically, though yeah, that too, but she had this energy. Loud, confident, magnetic. The kind of self-assured presence that draws people in when you're a teenager. She was everything I wanted, and she couldn't have been less interested. Then came the school summer project assignments. By some ridiculous stroke of luck, I got paired with Emily. At first, we only talked about the assignment, but eventually our conversations drifted. We'd message on AIM for hours, about school, our families, our dreams. It wasn't flirty. It felt like a genuine friendship. But in my head, it was a second chance. I had once been the weird outsider in her world, and now I was rewriting that story. Only, part of it was built on a lie. I told Emily I had a girlfriend. In reality, there was just this girl I hung out with a few times that summer. I posted photos of us on MySpace and Facebook, letting Emily assume we were dating. It wasn't just to make her jealous, though yeah, that was part of it. It was also to make her feel safe around me, to convince her I wasn't chasing her anymore. And it worked. She relaxed, and I got to build this fantasy where she started to see me as someone desirable. I'd invent stories about romantic dates, dinners under fairy lights, walks through botanical gardens, late-night drives to nowhere. And Emily loved it. She'd sigh and say how that was exactly what she wanted. She'd complain about how guys never put in real effort, so I tailored my stories to hit that emotional nerve. She'd stay up listening to me talk about this imaginary relationship, practically narrating her own unmet needs. I took mental notes the entire time. When the school year resumed, I broke up with my fake girlfriend. Quietly, of course. Emily and I kept talking. I asked her out once. She turned me down. I knew she liked me in a strange, conflicted way, but not enough. Friends told me she still thought I was weird, off. I had nervous habits back then. I fidgeted a lot. I think that's what unsettled her. So I changed. I started lifting weights, learned how to dress better, watched how other people talked, moved, stood. I trained myself to hold eye contact, to stop fidgeting. It was exhausting, but I thought I was turning into the kind of guy she wanted. Then one day, out of nowhere, Emily told me her best friend Sierra liked me. Sierra was Emily's opposite. Quiet,
grounded, introverted. We had barely spoken 10 words before that. But Sierra was beautiful, curvy in all the ways teenage boys obsess over, and she had this gentle, calming warmth. I wasn't in love with her, but I figured, why not? If I couldn't have Emily, maybe this would bring me closer. So I leaned into it. I took Sierra on the most romantic dates I could imagine, not to impress her, but to make sure Emily heard about them. I brought Sierra to places I knew Emily would swoon over. Outdoor movies, lakeside picnics, cozy little cafes. I played it slow, barely even kissed her at first. I became the thoughtful, patient guy Emily always said she wanted but never got. After every date, I'd casually mention something to Emily. We tried this new spot, or I made her a playlist. Then Sierra would fill in the rest. I know Emily was listening, and I know it got to her. Meanwhile, Emily and her boyfriend at the time was a disaster. Cheap, controlling, emotionally immature. She once complained he took her to Applebee's with a Groupon and then tried to pressure her in the parking lot. She told me she wished guys were more like me. She had no idea I was curating my relationship with Sierra just to create that effect. But something unexpected happened. I actually started falling for Sierra. What began as strategy slowly turned into something real. We didn't have tons in common, but she made me feel safe, steady. She supported me in ways I never expected from someone I barely knew. She was patient, kind, and genuinely excited about building a future. Even early on, we talked about marriage, kids, buying a house someday, and I realized I didn't want to let that go. So I made a choice. I let go of Emily emotionally. I stopped fantasizing about something that was never going to happen, and I went all in on Sierra. She was the real thing. I just hadn't seen it at first. Right around then, Emily and her boyfriend had a massive breakup. Explosive. And like clockwork, she called me crying, needing someone to talk to. But I was already on the phone with Sierra. I told her I'd call her later. That one moment changed everything. Emily snapped. She called Sierra and went off, saying things like, "I had him first, and he only wants you because I put you two together." She was furious, jealous. Sierra was blindsided. She had no idea Emily harbored any of those feelings. They'd been best friends for years, and just like that, it was over. No more sleepovers, no more texts, no more friendship. Their entire history gone in a single call. Sierra never forgave her, and she still hasn't. It's been over 15 years since all that. Sierra and I got married 5 years ago. We bought a house. We're trying to start a family. I never told her the full story about why I dated her at first, about how much manipulation went into those early days, and I don't think I ever will. But I love her deeply. Not in a "I grew to love her" kind of way. I genuinely believe we were meant to end up together. I just took a really messed up path to get here. Sometimes I think about Emily, what she's doing now, whether she ever thinks about me, whether she regrets waiting too long. Not in a longing kind of way, more like remembering a version of yourself you no longer recognize. I didn't share this story to make myself sound good. Honestly, I don't think I do come off well. But the truth is complicated. Sometimes the person who wins didn't even know they were playing a game.
Back in 2003, the company I worked for shut down, and just like that, I was out of a job. Fortunately, I had a solid reputation as a skilled machinist and didn't have to job hunt for long. Within a day, I landed a position at a company we'll call Spiral. They specialized in custom, high-precision tools, and at first, the place seemed decent enough. Spiral was owned and run by one guy. Let's call him Dick, a fitting name, as you'll soon see. He was in the building every single day, pacing around like he owned the air we breathed. When I joined, there was a floor supervisor who was actually great. Fair, experienced, respected by the crew. The kind of guy you could turn to with any problem and get real solutions. About a year in, that supervisor and Dick had a massive falling out. Nobody knew exactly what happened, but it was messy. The next day, Dick called me into his office and told me I was now in charge. No warning, no raise, just, you are the guy now. That should have been my first red flag. Let me paint a picture of Dick. He started Spiral out of his garage in the 70s and managed to grow it into a multi-million-dollar company by his early 30s. He even developed a large industrial park where Spiral was headquartered. He was easily one of the wealthiest men in the state. But wealth doesn't equal class. Dick was the most condescending, arrogant prick I've ever met. He screamed at employees for talking to each other, treated them like disposable trash, and had a compulsive need to brag about how rich he was, all while paying us barely above minimum wage. For some reason, he treated me and one other guy slightly better, but that didn't mean good. It just meant the abuse came in a different flavor. Still, we weren't allowed to talk during work. If he caught us chatting for even a second, he'd explode. Once I was unofficially in charge, I got a front row seat to just how shady he really was. During one of his ego-fueled rants, he let it slip that he was cooking the books. Spiral paid outrageous rent to the industrial park, conveniently owned by another of his shell companies. On paper, Spiral barely broke even. In reality, he was raking in cash and hiding it behind fake expenses. He once bragged that he buried barrels of industrial waste on his personal property to avoid disposal fees, just dug a hole in his backyard and dumped it in one night. That job turned into a slow 10-year bleed. My responsibilities piled up: hiring, training, scheduling, production oversight, maintenance coordination. But my pay? That didn't pile up at all. Every time I asked for a raise, he hit me with, "We're struggling financially," and reminded me how lucky I was to have a job. It wasn't just insulting, it felt like a prison. My paycheck kept me barely afloat. I couldn't afford to leave, and I think Dick knew it. The turnover rate was insane, around 95%. People would quit after just a week or two. Eventually, even temp agencies stopped sending us people. That's when you know you've hit rock bottom, when temps would rather stay unemployed than work at your shop. Eventually, I got smart. I began calling myself plant manager in emails and documents. At first, Dick rolled his eyes, but when I framed it as something that could help us attract better candidates, he begrudgingly agreed. That was my golden ticket. I didn't have a college degree, but now I had the title and 10 years of real-world experience to back it up. I started job hunting in earnest. After 6 long months, I found a company that wanted me, better pay, real benefits, Spiral had none, and a healthy work culture. There was just one catch. They wanted a full 2-week notice. That was a no-go. I'd seen what happened to everyone who gave notice at Spiral. They were immediately kicked out. Dick had zero interest in professionalism, just ego. So instead, I quietly packed up my things, made sure I had all the documentation I needed, and waited until the end of what I'd decided would be my last shift. That night, I sat at my desk and sent 3 emails. One to the head of OSHA, one to my contact at the state EPA, one to the state attorney general's office. I didn't have to lie, I just laid out what I'd witnessed and been told: the book cooking, the waste dumping, the unsafe conditions, and the willful neglect. I had more than enough evidence. I left my keys on the desk. On top of them was a note with 2 simple words: I quit. I knew I was lighting a fire as I walked out the door. And yeah, I was a little bummed I wouldn't be around to watch it burn. But about a month later, I got a call from my OSHA contact. Spiral had already been hit with $150,000 in fines for willful violations. The EPA? They had to excavate half of Dick's backyard before he finally confessed to where he'd buried the waste. I never heard exactly what happened with the Attorney General, but I do know this: Dick ended up behind bars. Poetic justice. It took 10 years of being underpaid, disrespected, and financially trapped. But in the end, I walked away with my head high and watched a crooked millionaire finally get what was coming to him. Best resignation ever.
All right, here's a truth nobody wants to say out loud, but I will. There was this kid in my town, a year below me in school. Senior year, he was basically the golden boy, straight out of a high school drama, the quarterback who had it all: money, girls, charm, and zero humility. Football star, ran track, played baseball and basketball, straight A student, and if the rumors were true, half of his assignments were done by other kids he intimidated or bribed. He was always with a cheerleader on his arm and that arrogant smirk on his face. Everyone adored him: teachers, coaches, parents, even the school board. But this guy, he was a total asshole. I'm not talking about your average jerk. He went out of his way to humiliate anyone he deemed beneath him, kids who weren't popular, rich, or attractive enough. It wasn't just an attitude, it was his mission. I once saw him dump fast food wrappers on marching band kids just to mock them. He threw a tuba across the grass for laughs. He didn't care. He knew he'd get away with it. He always did. As for me, I was mostly left alone. I had some mutual friends in his circle. I guess that gave me a layer of protection. But that didn't extend to the people I actually cared about. He'd torment kids I hung out with, and then flash me a smile, like I was supposed to be thankful he didn't come for me too, like I owed him for his selective cruelty. Then came last weekend. Huge end-of-year house party. Everyone was there, including me, mostly out of boredom. I didn't care to drink or hook up. I just had nothing better to do. And of course, Golden Boy was there, doing his usual thing, drinking like it was an Olympic event. Totally obliterated, stumbling into furniture, puking in bushes, slurring his words, a complete mess. Around 3 a.m., he and some equally drunk friends piled into a truck. No seatbelts, going 85 in a 40, twisting roads, pitch black outside. You already know how it ends. Driver loses control, hits a pole. Our hometown hero flies through the windshield, smacks into a tree, dead on impact. And you know what I felt when I heard? Relief. Not shock, not sadness, not even indifference. Just pure relief. Because I knew exactly what the world had just been spared. But now watching everyone act like we lost a saint, it makes me sick. The kid was a monster, and now the whole town's pretending he was some kind of martyr. That morning, I woke up to sobbing, screaming, news stories, coaches crying on TV about what an inspiration he was. Grief counselors were brought to school. We got out of class early for reflection. They even raised money for his family, his filthy rich family, like they were victims of some act of God, not the fact their arrogant son got himself killed. I heard someone call it an unavoidable tragedy. Really? Unavoidable? That kid climbed into a moving death trap by choice. He was drunk, he was reckless,
and every part of that night was preventable. But no one is allowed to say that. Everyone's too busy crying over how he touched so many lives and was full of love. It makes me want to scream. What about the band kid that died last year? The quiet one who played clarinet and was genuinely kind. He got a 10-minute speech over morning announcements and some awkward silence at lunch. No counselors, no fundraisers, no fake eulogies. Because he wasn't popular, he wasn't rich. He didn't have the town eating out of his hand. This double standard is disgusting. And nobody wants to be honest about it. So fine. I'll be the one to say it. I'm glad he's gone. I'm glad he won't be around to make life miserable for anyone else. I'm glad no more band kids will get trash dumped on them. I'm glad no more quiet freshmen will be bullied just for existing. The truth is, he wasn't taken too soon. He was taken before he could do more damage. I know how that sounds. I know you're not supposed to say that about someone who died. But if we can't be honest about someone after they're gone, what's the point in remembering them at all? The fake tears, the rose-colored lies. He was a bully who died doing something stupid. And I won't pretend otherwise. Let everyone else rewrite his story. I'll remember the truth.
A little over a year ago, I found out my husband was cheating on me. It started like most gut feelings do. Quiet, almost dismissible. There weren't any glaring red flags or dramatic changes in his behavior. He didn't come home smelling like perfume or text from the other side of the couch with a guilty grin. No, it was the little things. Like how he used to double text me when he was out of town just to say he missed me. Then, suddenly, silence. He used to come back from trips with souvenirs or funny stories. Now, all I got were vague shrugs and tired eyes. It was subtle, but it was there. I think I knew long before I started snooping, but when someone promises to love you forever, you want to believe them. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, until that doubt becomes deafening. One night, while he was snoring peacefully beside me like nothing was wrong, I got up, went to the kitchen, and made tea I didn't even drink. I sat there for 20 minutes, wondering if I could live with the possibility that he was hiding something. Then, I walked into his office and opened his email. There it was. Not just flirtation, not just a one-time mistake like cheaters love to call it. A full-blown affair. Trips, dinners, photos. There was even one picture of them kissing on a rooftop bar with the city skyline in the background. And in that moment, I snapped. He looked happier in that photo than I'd seen him in years. That was when the sadness in me died, and something much colder took its place. But I didn't lose it. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. Instead, I calmly closed the laptop and started searching for divorce lawyers the next day during my lunch break. I didn't want a messy exit. I wanted a calculated one. I met with a lawyer in secret. He confirmed that based on my income and the length of our marriage, I was definitely eligible for alimony. When he asked if I had proof, I showed him the emails and photos, all already backed up to my private drive. He gave me a look that said, "You're not the first, and sadly, you won't be the last." He then asked if my husband had any major financial changes coming up. I told him yes. He was set to receive a big raise in the next fiscal quarter. My lawyer smiled and told me that waiting until the raise went through would significantly increase the alimony calculation. That's when it clicked. Not only was I getting out, I was going to make him pay, literally. So I played the part. I smiled. I cooked. I kept up appearances. He had no idea that I was spending every lunch break collecting documents, printing financial records, and setting myself up to walk away with the house and a hefty monthly check. Meanwhile, he kept sneaking off to hotels with his little work fling and coming home to the wife who folded his laundry and kissed him goodnight. I could have confronted him every time I passed him in the hallway, but I bit my tongue, because anger brings short-term satisfaction. Silence? Silence lets you win. Then the raise came through. His company emailed out the new salary brackets, and I printed that email with shaking hands. That weekend, I double-checked every file in my folder and smiled to myself, knowing exactly how this was going to end. This morning, I made him breakfast. Eggs, just the way he likes them. Toast with good jam, even coffee. Brought to him in bed. He didn't deserve it, but that wasn't the point. I watched him sip the coffee and call me the best wife in the world. And something inside of me finally exhaled. When he smiled, I kissed him on the cheek and said, "I'll be filing for divorce this week. The paperwork will be sent to your office." I can't even describe the look on his face, like someone told him the world was ending and Santa Claus had died at the same time. First came confusion, then panic. He stood up and started yelling, asking what was wrong, calling me insane. Then came the tears. "Why are you doing this? What's happening? I love you. Don't do this." I didn't say a word. I walked upstairs, grabbed my pre-packed bag, and left to stay at a hotel. Since then, he's left me 18 voicemails, not a single one taking responsibility. Just, "What did I do?" and "How could you do this to us?" No mention of the cheating. No apology. Here's the thing. I'm not mad anymore. I'm not heartbroken. I just feel free. He'll be paying me alimony. I'll be keeping the house. He'll have to watch me move on, knowing full well that he threw away a loyal, committed wife for a fling he couldn't even keep discreet. Update. Since that morning, a few wild things have happened. First, I've received some completely unlinched messages from random men I don't even know, telling me I'm evil for making him pay alimony, that I'm ruining his life, that I should have just forgiven him. One even had the audacity to say it was my fault for not being interesting enough to keep my husband's attention. Newsflash: cheaters cheat. It's not about the partner. It's about entitlement. If you think I'm the bad guy for holding him accountable, then you're part of the problem. Second, my soon-to-be ex keeps messaging my friends trying to get sympathy. Too bad most of them saw through his act years ago and are firmly on my side. A few have even offered to testify if he tries to contest anything. Lastly, and maybe most satisfying of all, I have it in writing that he's responsible for the majority of our marital debt. He used our joint credit to impress his mistress, so when the courts see it, it's all on him. To anyone who needs to hear this, don't scream. Don't throw the dishes. Don't give him the satisfaction of knowing he hurt you. Play the long game. Collect your evidence, protect your peace, then walk away like the badass you are, while he drowns in the mess he made. I'm not bitter. I'm not vengeful. I'm just done. And that is the most powerful place to be.
All of this just happened, and I'm still trying to process it. I've always been into crime documentaries and real-life mystery shows, the kind that make you extra cautious when something feels off. And honestly, I believe watching those shows helped me stay alert today. Because if I hadn't been, I don't even want to imagine how differently things could have ended. Let me back up. Right now, my wife and I aren't living together. Things have been tense. She's been unpredictable lately, especially around our daughter.
So I've been the one taking care of her. Our little girl is almost 18 months old, and she's the center of my entire world. I'm currently between jobs, but my mom has been helping a lot. It hasn't been easy, but we're managing. Around 4 p.m. today, I took my daughter to the store, like I usually do after her nap. She's very active, chatty, wiggly, and curious, so shopping with her is always an adventure. Normally, we'd just go for juice, but we were out of some essentials: flour, sugar, noodles, and I remembered we needed milk, too. I had my hands full, so I couldn't hold her hand like I usually do. I walked just behind her, encouraging her to stay close. Of course, she kept stopping to look at colorful packages or poke things on the lower shelves. I kept nudging her along, trying not to sound frustrated. Looking back, I should have just grabbed a basket. When we finally reached the front, Register 1 was open. It's right next to the customer service desk near the entrance. While we waited, I kept her entertained with games like Patty Cake and Itsy Bitsy Spider to stop her from wandering off. She waved at people walking by, squealing, "Hi!" like she always does. Most people smiled and waved back. Some even stopped to say how adorable she was. I'm used to it. She's like a little sunshine magnet. The cashier was still helping someone with a return. I told my daughter to hold my hand while I got ready to pay. I let go for just a second to pull out my debit card, glancing at her every few seconds to make sure she hadn't wandered off. Everything seemed normal. Until the cashier suddenly shouted, "What are you doing with his daughter?" I turned around, just in time to see a man lifting my daughter into his arms and running toward the exit. The doors didn't open, thankfully. They're one-way doors that only open for incoming customers. The cashier grabbed the phone and started calling the police while I stood there, frozen, trying to comprehend what was happening right in front of me. Then my instincts kicked in. I bolted after him. I usually carry a pocket knife for practical things, opening seals on bottles and such. I considered pulling it out, but decided against it. I didn't want to escalate the situation. I sprinted after the guy just as someone entered through the outer doors. Before the man could slip past them, I punched him square in the side of the head. He stumbled. I grabbed my daughter out of his arms. She was crying, but physically unharmed. The man ran off empty-handed, disappearing into the parking lot. The police arrived within 5 minutes. I gave them every detail I could remember. I hadn't seen his face clearly. He had long, messy hair, a beard, and wore a hoodie. Officers canvassed the area, spoke to witnesses, and tried to track him down. Someone said they saw him running behind the building, but they didn't catch him that day. After taking our statements, 2 officers offered to drive us home. Once there, they asked more questions. Had I seen the man before? Could I think of anyone suspicious? What was our home situation like? I told them everything, including that Child Protective Services had already visited earlier that day to check in on my wife's mental health. They listened carefully, gave me their cards, and promised to follow up. About 20 minutes after they left, I got another knock on the door. It was the same officers, but this time, they were carrying the biggest box of diapers I've ever seen, along with wipes, 6 huge grocery bags full of food, some toys, and a card. After they left, I opened the card. Inside it said, "You're a strong father. Your daughter is lucky to have you." There was also a $100 bill with a note that said, "Get yourself a drink or whatever you need." I don't drink, but I'm going to use that money to buy something nice for my daughter and my mom. After everything we've been through, they deserve it.
This is a true story, real as anything that's ever happened to me. I'm 60 now. I've lived a full life, raised a family, and I'm a grandmother. But this memory is still sharp. It's one of those moments that never fades, no matter how much time passes. Back in 1986, I was heading home after a summer working in Yellowstone National Park. I made a quick stop in Topeka, Kansas to visit a friend who had just moved there with his parents after graduating high school. What was meant to be a short visit turned into a week, and his family invited me to stay one extra day to join them for a big family reunion out in the countryside. We took his beat-up old car, the kind that had seen better days and had a broken gas gauge. We spent the entire day out in the middle of nowhere with his extended family, eating, chatting, and enjoying the sunshine. As the sun started to dip, we hit the road back to Topeka, assuming we had enough gas to get there. Big surprise, we didn't. The car sputtered and died on the side of an empty rural road. My friend guessed we were about 6 or 7 miles from the nearest gas station. No cell phones back then. We were trying to figure out what to do when a white work van with no windows pulled up beside us. It looked rough, the kind of vehicle you instinctively don't trust. A man leaned out from the passenger side and asked if we needed help. When you're that age, you think people are just being kind. When you're older, you realize how lucky you were that things didn't go another way. We told them we were out of gas. They offered us a ride to the station, and without much thought, we agreed. Once we got into the van, we realized there were 3 men inside. There were no seats in the back, just an empty, worn-out cargo space. We sat on the floor. That's when we clearly heard the men talking about doing something to us. The driver mentioned he knew a good place. The man in the passenger seat looked at me and agreed. My mind was only just catching up to what was going on when the third man, the one sitting closest to us, spoke up. He said, "I'm not in. I don't want anything to do with this. I've got a baby now, and I'm not okay with this." I repeated, he wanted no part in whatever was about to happen. The other 2 mumbled something I couldn't hear. Then there was a tense silence. My mind just repeated one word: help. I felt like I couldn't think straight. Part of me was in denial, part in shock. The fear hadn't even fully hit yet. It was like watching a horror movie happen to someone else. Less than an hour earlier, I had felt completely safe. Now, the idea that someone might kill me or do something equally awful and leave us where no one would ever find us was all I could think about. I couldn't stop those thoughts from racing. If you've ever been to Kansas, you'll know there are endless, desolate roads, empty and God-forsaken. If that third guy hadn't spoken up or even just said, "Let them out first," I don't think I'd be here telling you the story. That's when they stopped talking. They never spoke to us directly after we got in. My friend and I didn't speak to each other either. We were too terrified. I could hear every creak and rattle of that van. I saw my friend tense his muscles as if to say he'd fight if he had to. The men continued talking about where it'd take us. Then suddenly, the guy in the back said it again. "No." And just like that, the driver pulled over. The man in the back opened the door and let us out. It was over. When we stepped out, the air felt strange, fragile, and tainted. The ground didn't even feel real. My friend looked as shaken as I felt. We had survived a close encounter with darkness, predators in human form. I saw the gas station under the fading light of sunset. It looked like a glowing beacon of safety. I knew that once we reached it, there was no way I was walking back to that car. As the white van pulled away, it felt like watching a nightmare dissolve, but part of me still feared it might suck us back in. To this day, when I close my eyes, I can still see that van driving off, like a mirage from a nightmare that somehow leaked into real life.
I'll try to keep this story short, but what makes it truly creepy are the details. On a whim, my mom and I decided to visit Nevada City, California. It's an old Victorian-era mining and logging town, built in 1856. If you Google pictures of it, you'll see what I mean. It looks haunted even in broad daylight. After grabbing lunch at a brew pub, we wandered over to the massive Pioneer Historical Cemetery on the outskirts of town. It wasn't quite dusk yet, but the trees in that area are incredibly tall, so it's hard to tell the time of day. It always feels later than it really is. The cemetery was enormous, like most pioneer graveyards, due to the high mortality rate back then. So many child graves, it was heartbreaking. At first, the cemetery looked traditional. Large, ornate tombstones, family plots, marble obelisks, mausoleums. But then it just kept going, stretching deep into the woods. The further we walked, the wilder and more overgrown it got, until eventually we couldn't tell where the cemetery ended and the forest began. Graves were scattered and hard to recognize. We even saw signs of old homeless camps, abandoned tents, trash, scraps of clothing. Eventually the trees thinned out and we came into a clearing. There was a tall juniper tree and thick brush around it, with a few random graves here and there. As I was walking, I tripped over something. It was a purse, a designer bag, but it looked ancient, like it had been lying there for years. When I looked up, about 10 yards ahead, I saw what looked like a pile of women's clothing. Then I noticed a tangled mess of hair, and I froze. It's hard to explain, but I knew it was a dead body. I hadn't even fully seen it, but my gut just screamed it. I instinctively reached out and stopped my mom behind me. "Get your phone. Call 911. That's a body." She didn't even question me, just started dialing 911. She must have felt it too. Then things got bizarre. While we were talking, distracted, we glanced back, and I swear to God, the woman was now sitting up. Her back was to us. She wore a bright red trench coat, and her filthy blonde hair stuck up in every direction, almost defying gravity from how matted it was. Slowly, like something out of a horror movie, she turned her head over her shoulder and locked eyes with us. That's when we realized she wasn't dead. She jumped to her feet with terrifying speed and fully turned to face us. Her clothes were shredded, barely covering her body. She started lurching toward us in a jerky, unnatural way. Her hands fumbled as she tried to keep herself covered. My first thought was that maybe she had been assaulted. She tried to speak but couldn't form real words, only high-pitched squeaking sounds. When she got closer, she stopped and pointed excitedly at the purse I had tripped over. I asked if it was hers. Her expression changed instantly into the most disturbing smirk I've ever seen, one that still haunts me. And then she started undressing, slowly, deliberately. We had to shout at her to stop. By then, the police were already on their way. We told them we'd found someone in serious distress, but even as we said that, we knew we were not safe. We backed away slowly, then turned and got out of there as quickly as we could. Later, we followed up with the police out of concern and, honestly, morbid curiosity. They said no one was there when they arrived. No sign of her? Nothing. I pray she got the help she needed, but I'll never forget the way she looked at us, and I'll never set foot in that cemetery again.
Back in 1998 or 1999, I was about 5 or 6 years old, living in a rough part of downtown, an area known for crime and drugs. Our house had a huge backyard, but it was completely overgrown, like a wild jungle of trees and dense bushes. Nature had reclaimed it, along with the occasional stranger passing through. We knew that because we'd often find used needles scattered around, and even a half mattress that somehow ended up stuck 15 feet high in the trees. There was a narrow path in the back that people used as a shortcut to the main road, so we saw a lot of sketchy foot traffic. For a child, that backyard was a nightmare. I hated it from the moment we moved in. I kept telling my mom that someone was watching me through my bedroom window at night. A couple of times I even saw flashlights shine into my room, and once I caught a glimpse of a face. I still remember those dark, piercing eyes. At first, I didn't say anything, but eventually I told my mom. She brushed it off as a bad dream. She kept ignoring my complaints for a week or two, even though I was insistent. One night, after struggling to calm me down, she decided to prove there was nothing out there. The next morning, she took me outside to show me, but what we saw changed everything. Right beneath my window, the grass had been completely flattened into mud. The ground was damp and dead-looking. There were scratches on the window frame as if someone had tried to pry it open with a tool. It was a small basement window, the kind that doesn't open easily. That might have been what saved me. My mom was horrified. She wanted to move immediately, but we were broke. Leaving just wasn't an option. Around that time, I'd become best friends with the girl who lived next door. We were inseparable. We didn't understand danger back then, and often did dumb things, like going door to door asking neighbors for candy. One of our favorite stops was a sweet elderly lady who always gave us Hostess cakes. Sometimes she even let us come inside and hang out. She was incredibly kind and looked out for us in her own way. Our parents had no idea that was our little secret. One day, my mom called me home to go pick up dinner just around the corner. We were gone for maybe 15 minutes, but when we returned, everything had changed. Our block was sealed off with police tape. There were news vans, cop cars, and even a helicopter circling above. While we were gone, a man, someone who wasn't from our neighborhood but had been staying with his mother, walked past my best friend's yard. She was just sitting on the porch, talking to the phone and goofing around, but for some reason he thought she was mocking him. He got so angry at the idea that he walked back to his mother's house, grabbed a butcher knife, and came back to hurt her. Thankfully, she saw him coming and ran inside. She locked herself in the bathroom and called the police. She still had the phone in her hand. Her mom, though, wasn't so lucky. She had been in the kitchen. The man broke in and attacked her. He stabbed her multiple times. I had originally thought it was over 20 times, but later found a 1998 newspaper article that said it was 7. Miraculously, she survived. After several surgeries and a long recovery, she pulled through. The story made the news. My mom and I followed every update, hoping her mom would be okay. I'll never forget the day they showed the attacker's mugshot on TV, and my blood ran cold. That was the man I'd seen outside my window. The same man who had tried to kill my friend's mom was the one who had watched me sleep. Later, I learned that we had unknowingly met him weeks earlier at the sweet old lady's house. He was her son. He had just been released from prison and was living with her. We had met him during one of our candy visits, and apparently, from that moment on, he had been watching us. I don't remember him from that first encounter, but maybe if I had recognized something, I could have told someone. Maybe none of this would have happened. We never ended up moving. My mom figured since he was in jail, the danger was over, so we stayed for a few more years. But to this day, I cannot sleep in a room with open blinds. To the man who used to watch me sleep, who tried to take a mother from a child, I hope I never see you again.
and I hope you're rotting in prison.
Back in 2015, I was working as a live-in home health aide for a wealthy family. It was just me and my patient living together in a nice condo tucked away in a quiet neighborhood on a golf course. We were easily the youngest people in the entire community. I was 27 at the time, and my patient, let's call him Jake, was only 21. Jake had been diagnosed with a form of autism that required special support. He also had sensory processing disorder, borderline personality disorder, and a history of substance abuse. On top of that, he'd recently gotten into legal trouble and had been declared incompetent by the courts. Jake was a kind kid at heart, but emotionally unstable and with almost no social awareness. He often refused to take his medication, even though it worked very well when he did. That, combined with his drug use, made him an easy target for people who wanted to take advantage of him. And many did. Right before I moved in, 6 so-called friends came over to hang out and ended up staying for 2 weeks, draining Jake's bank account while binging on meth, cocaine, MDMA, and weed. They trashed the condo. Jake, who mentally resembled a teenager more than a grown man, didn't know how to say no. He just wanted people to like him. Drugs, in a twisted way, became his means of fitting in and coping with depression and anxiety. By the time I arrived, things had calmed down. Honestly, it was a pretty sweet gig. I was paid well, had a nice place to live rent-free, and my main responsibilities were simple: keep the condo clean, ensure food was stocked, and help Jake stay on his meds. When I first moved in, Jake's mom, who was technically my boss, sat me down and warned me about one person in particular, a woman named Amber. She lived off and on in the unit downstairs with her father and occasionally visited her 2 children, whom her father had full custody of. Amber was 37 years old, tall, thin, blonde, and honestly looked at least 10 years younger than she was. If you passed her on the street, you might think she was in her mid-20s. Jake's mom told me Amber was trouble. She was an addict, unemployed, and had no car, and was always looking for someone to manipulate. She also had a history with Jake. Not long before I got there, Amber had asked Jake to borrow his car for an hour. She disappeared with it for 2 weeks. She had also introduced Jake to the group that trashed his condo. After the car theft, Jake's mom installed a GPS tracker on his vehicle that could even disable the engine remotely. She told me I wasn't expected to act as security, but if Amber showed up or Jake went anywhere with her, I needed to call her immediately. Over the next few weeks, I had a few minor run-ins with Amber. She would randomly show up, trying to talk her way inside or convince Jake to drive her places. Each time, I had to politely but firmly shut her down. No, you can't come in. No, Jake won't be driving you anywhere. No, he's not going to that party. She never got aggressive, but she clearly didn't like me. She'd say things like, "Jake's an adult, you know. He doesn't need a babysitter." She always tried to whisper to Jake when we saw her around, likely trying to get rides or money out of him. Amber always seemed off. Her speech was slow and spacey. Her eyes were wide, like she was constantly zoned out. She told me she'd recently been hit by a car while biking, but later I learned she'd just been high on Xanax the whole time. That explained why she seemed so out of it whenever I saw her. Then one night, Jake was out of town visiting his father, giving me a little mini vacation. My best friend was over, and we were just hanging out, drinking PBRs, watching RuPaul's Drag Race. Low-key evening. Around 11 p.m., there was a light knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was Amber. I ignored it. About 30 seconds later, she knocked again, this time louder.
I still didn't answer. She left briefly, but eventually came back. This time, she was pounding on the door like a cop. I was irritated. I was off work and didn't want to deal with her, especially not in front of my friend. Then she tried a softer approach, knocking and calling out, "Hello, Jake, I need help. Hello?" I stayed quiet. That's when I heard the door handle jiggle. She tried to open it, but it was, of course, locked. I always kept it locked. That set her off. She began pounding harder, screaming like something had snapped. I got up and looked through the peephole again. What I saw is something I'll never forget. Her eyes were huge, pupils blown wide. Her hair was tangled and wild, sweat pouring down her face. She looked absolutely unhinged. I asked through the door what she wanted. She said she needed to talk to Jake, that he owed her money and that she needed a ride to her boyfriend's house immediately. I told her Jake wasn't home and I couldn't help her. Then she asked if I could drive her. I said I was drinking and was heading to bed. She needed to leave. That's when she let out this frustrated, almost primal scream and punched the door before storming off. After a while, my friend and I went to bed, figuring that was the end of it. The next morning, just as we were getting ready to go out for breakfast, there was another knock, this time loud and firm. The kind you know immediately is from law enforcement. I checked the peephole, no Amber. It was a cop. When I opened the door, I saw police everywhere. Squad cars, a crime scene van, and an ambulance. My first thought, Amber must have overdosed or something. When the officer asked what I'd heard the night before, I told him about Amber's visit and asked if she was okay. That's when he told me Amber was in custody for the murder of her father. Then he asked me if Jake owned a crossbow and whether it had been missing. The answer to both was yes, it had been missing for weeks. Later, detectives told me that Amber had gotten into an argument with her father that night after he refused to drive her, likely because she was desperate to get to her boyfriend for more drugs. Things escalated. She used the stolen crossbow and attacked her father. Reports revealed she stabbed him over 70 times with the crossbow and various other objects. After killing him, she stole his truck but didn't get far. Police pulled her over for suspected drunk driving less than a mile from our condo. She told them she was rushing because something might have happened to her father, but wouldn't say why. That led them to do a welfare check. Later, Amber led police on a high-speed chase across 2 counties before crashing. She was arrested and later indicted for first-degree premeditated murder. So yeah, that was the night my drug-addicted neighbor tried to drag me into her chaos, either just before or right after she murdered her father with my patient's crossbow. Safe to say, I hope I never see her again.
I should start by saying this is an extremely complicated and deeply personal story. I'll do my best to tell it as clearly as I can. Names and identifying details have been changed or omitted. I've struggled with mental health issues from a young age, and by the time I was 15, things became unmanageable for my parents. After my freshman year of high school, they decided to send me to a lockdown school. One morning, I woke up to find 2 strangers in my house, telling me I was being taken to a boarding school. They said that if I refused, they'd cuff me. So I went. After a wilderness program, I was placed in a residential treatment center, RTC. The school I was sent to was connected to several abusive lockdown facilities in the US, many of which have, thankfully, since been shut down. The environment was harsh and traumatic. Isolation, forced medication, physical restraints, stress positions, attack therapy, and the withholding of food and exercise were all common.
The full extent of what happened there isn't the main point of this story, but what matters is this. I arrived already struggling, and that place completely broke me. I dissociated most of the time just to survive. A few weeks in, a boy named James joined our dorm unit. That's where the story I want to share truly begins. At first, I disliked James. He annoyed me, and I was rude to him on purpose. But we ended up sharing a room, and over time, things changed. I started to feel attached to him. We spent a lot of time together, bonding in private. I didn't realize it then, but I was falling in love with him. At the time, I identified as straight, so I thought of it as a brotherly connection. But looking back, the feelings were clearly deeper. As the abuse around us worsened, James and I relied on each other for survival. We were everything to each other. The shared trauma created a bond I thought was unbreakable. We promised to stay close even after leaving. Luckily, James lived only about an hour from my parents. When he was discharged, I begged my parents to let me leave too, and eventually they did. The moment I got home, I called James. We started seeing each other a few times a week, and for a while it was the happiest time of my life. He was my world. He understood me in ways no one else ever had. But things began to change. His parents noticed how close and physically affectionate we were, and how emotionally dependent I was on him. I'll never know exactly what happened behind the scenes, but one day I got an email from James saying he thought we should see each other less. At the bottom, he included a painful joke. We used to say we loved each other with 99% of our souls, because he said he couldn't give 100% since he didn't fully love himself. In the email, he wrote, "P.S. It's 72% now." I completely broke down. I grabbed something sharp and cut my wrists, crying and screaming, begging for it not to be real. How could this be happening? No one would ever understand me the way he did. I couldn't breathe without him. We saw each other a few more times, but everything had changed. He was distant. During our last meeting, he told me he wanted to cut contact completely. That's when it all started spiraling. I started calling him constantly. I knew his house phone and his cell, and I'd call all day, sometimes not saying anything, other times crying, begging him to talk to me or love me again. I even called his parents, pleading with them. It escalated. I got his mom's cell and work numbers, and even tracked down his dad's contacts too. I called them all, sometimes crying, sometimes just sitting silently on the line. I manipulated a mutual friend into calling him while I listened in, feeding her questions. Eventually, they changed all of their numbers. Before we lost contact, James and I had a church group together. I knew he still went, so my girlfriend at the time, an older woman, drove me there to try to see him. The first couple of times he wasn't there, but I kept coming back. On the third visit, he showed up. I approached him and asked, "Do you really not love me at all anymore?" He looked me in the eye and said, "No." That was it. Just no. I broke down in tears, causing a scene until the staff asked me to leave. I'm sure it was humiliating for him, especially since he also identified as straight. After that, I began having my girlfriend drive me to his house at night. I would sit in the car, staring up at his bedroom window. Sometimes I even had her knock on the door, asking if James was home. I did this more than once. Eventually, I convinced James to add me as a friend on MySpace. That gave me a bit of hope. Maybe we could fix things. But deep down, I think I knew it was over. I saw that he had a girlfriend now. I reached out to her, pretending to be harmless, and convinced her to meet me. She was kind, too trusting. I used that. She told me everything. His new numbers, his MySpace password, even private details about their relationship. I hacked his MySpace and shut it down. Then I started calling again. His house, his cell. I screamed at his mom, gloated to James about how I had manipulated his girlfriend. They had to change their numbers all over again. Finally, after one last phone call with James, something inside me snapped. I was done. I knew I couldn't keep doing this. I stopped everything. I feel terrible for what I did to him and his family. I wish I could apologize in person. I'm telling the story to give a glimpse into the mind of someone who stalks. It doesn't justify anything I did, but maybe it helps explain it. I was really sick, though. That's no excuse. I'm lucky I wasn't arrested. There's so much more to what we went through together, but I hope this helps someone understand why people fall into this kind of behavior. Today, I'm a very different person. I still struggle with mental health, but I've never acted out like that again. I've worked hard for years to build a stable life, and I hope sharing this helps others understand both stalking and the mental illness that sometimes fuels it.
Several years ago, when my son, who is now 18, was still a baby, I found myself longing for friendship. I had become a mother in my early 20s and was the first in my friend group to do so. That created a gap between us, not out of malice, but simply because our lives and priorities had become so different. They would visit occasionally and dote on my son, but beyond that, we no longer had much in common. During that time, a local woman reached out to me on social media and invited me to join a parenting forum filled with like-minded moms. For a while, it was amazing. I would log on daily to talk with other moms, we'd share parenting tips, recipes, jokes, and even do gift exchanges. The forum leaned toward alternative parenting styles, and many of us shared similar tastes in music, tattoos, and humor. We even divided ourselves into local groups for meetups, playdates, Halloween parties, and even kid-free nights at the bar. It was genuinely fun. Around then, a new girl joined the forum. She wasn't local, but she posted often and quickly became a well-known member. She said she was newly pregnant, and after a while announced she was expecting triplets. She seemed stunned but thrilled, and so were we. Since she hadn't used fertility treatments, it was a big surprise, but everyone was happy for her. She had a big personality and made friends easily. People began sending her baby gifts and even money to help with the sudden expansion of her family. She posted photos of her very large belly, and we all waited excitedly for the babies to arrive. Finally, she announced she had gone into early labor. According to her, she went to her local hospital, but had to be transferred to a larger hospital in the city due to the complications of delivering triplets. She claimed that one of the babies had died, one had gone home with her, and the third was in intensive care. A few days later, she shared that the third baby had also passed away. We were heartbroken for her. Members sent her more gifts, more money, and heartfelt sympathy cards. Then, the pictures began. First, she posted a photo of her surviving baby girl, an adorable, healthy-looking redhead. Then, she posted post-mortem photos of the two deceased babies. I'm a registered nurse, and while I don't work in NICU, I do know what premature, sick infants tend to look like. And these babies looked nothing like that. They looked just like the surviving baby, full-term, chubby, and healthy. The only difference was that they wore beanies to cover their hair, which she had previously described as being different colors from the surviving baby. It looked more like the same baby was photographed asleep, dressed differently. One of the women in the group even photoshopped one of the pictures, adding angel wings as a tribute. Around that same time, the woman posted a photo of herself in a hospital bed holding a baby. There was a nurse visible in the picture, and her name badge clearly showed the name of the local hospital, not the larger city hospital where the woman claimed she had delivered. It didn't add up. Would a nurse from one hospital travel to another hospital she didn't work at? Highly unlikely. As many of us were genuinely concerned, some tried to send flowers to the funeral home she claimed had handled the baby's services. But that funeral home had no record of her, and no other funeral home in the area had either. It made no sense. The forum moderators began digging and put the pieces together. They discovered she had been pregnant with just one baby. She had lied about her due date and fabricated the deaths of 2 babies in order to gain attention and receive gifts and money. Some local moms even visited her and confirmed that when they mentioned the other babies, her husband went completely silent, as if he was used to her pathological lying. Her photo of the giant belly turned out to be just a manipulated angle of a naturally large singleton pregnancy. Honestly, my own belly had looked larger when I was pregnant with my one son than my friends had with twins. The most heartbreaking part? While this circus was happening, 2 other moms in our group did actually lose their babies. Their grief was real, but it was largely overshadowed by the triplet drama because those grieving moms weren't seeking attention. They were quietly mourning their losses. One of them was local to me, and I attended their baby's funeral. It was the saddest funeral I have ever been to. Looking back, I'm glad I never sent any money or gifts to that manipulative woman. The group never fully recovered. While it continued to exist, the trust had been shattered. Many of us felt guilty for focusing on the dramatic liar, while real loss and pain went unnoticed in the background. Even though she was eventually banned, the atmosphere of the forum had permanently changed. And honestly, I still worry for her real child. If someone is willing to post pictures of their living baby and pretend they're dead for attention, what else might they be capable of doing?
I was recently reminded of this experience, and after reading so many other stories like it, I figured it was finally time to share mine. Honestly, I don't know how people usually verify their stories here, but I actually have some video recordings from that night, in case any mods ever want to see them. Yeah, it got real. This happened back in August of 2017. I was 23 at the time and had just moved back in with my mom while trying to get my life more stable. Around the same time, my car broke down, so I was relying entirely on Uber to get around. Since my closest friends lived about 30 minutes away, those rides were becoming frequent. That night, I was helping a friend move. After a long day of lifting boxes and rearranging furniture, we decided to unwind. We made a Target run, grabbed champagne and some orange juice. Apparently, I thought a guaranteed hangover sounded like a great idea before my work shift the next morning. Predictably, later that evening, I ended up curled over the toilet with a pounding migraine, throwing up everything in me and deeply regretting my life choices. While I was struggling, my friend scrambled to find me something for the headache. No one could find any painkillers, but of course our stoner friend stepped in and offered me an edible. For context, I hadn't touched weed in years, but I was desperate. I took half, hoping it might help me get through the night. About 45 minutes later, I felt stable enough to call an Uber home. My head was still foggy, but I figured it was better to leave before I felt worse. Since my closest friends lived about 30 minutes away, those rides were becoming frequent. I got in the back seat, and that's when things started to feel off. The driver turned around and introduced himself with a heavy southern drawl, thick like molasses. Something about him instantly made my stomach drop. You know when your instincts scream at you? Yeah, that. I told him I wasn't feeling well, I had a headache, and just wanted to get home. That's when he pulled out an already opened water bottle and some loose pills from the center console, offering them to me like it was normal. I politely took them, but didn't consume anything. I shoved the pills into the crack of the seat and put the water bottle into the seat pocket in front of me. Every internal alarm I had was blaring. But because of the edible, I was still floating in this fog, making it all even more terrifying. We started the 30-minute drive to my mom's house, and very quickly the conversation took a dark turn. He casually mentioned he'd done prison time, then went on about the good old days behind bars. He started rambling about conspiracy theories, saying the world would end by the end of 2017. His tone grew more unsettling with every mile. He kept circling the conversation back to his bunker. You should really see it sometime, fully stocked, enough supplies to last for years. Then, casually,
He asked if I wanted to go there instead of going home. He asked that multiple times. I kept replying with fake politeness, saying I had work early, maybe another time, trying to act like I wasn't terrified. Then came the real crazy. He started ranting about the earth being flat, government cover-ups, and even talked about giants in Kandahar, Afghanistan. He whispered, "You should probably not tell you this, but look up Kandahar giants on YouTube." His pupils were huge, his speech jittery. It was obvious he was high, unstable, or both. He casually mentioned he had an arsenal of guns at his bunker and even grew his own opium out there. Then he asked if I had any guns. I blurted out, "Oh yeah, tons," just hoping it might make him think twice before trying anything. At this point, I was in full-blown panic. I started secretly texting my friends, sharing my live location, and recording parts of the conversation on my phone. I captured about 7 minutes of footage, though the whole ride lasted over 30. As we neared my exit, things got worse. We were flying down the highway, and he made no effort to take the turn. I kept gently reminding him my exit was coming up, but he ignored me, still rambling about how safe his bunker would be. Finally, I snapped. I screamed at him to pull over, told him my mom was waiting, that I had work soon, anything to get him to stop. He still wouldn't get over. In total panic, I started kicking the back of his seat and threatening to open the door and jump if he didn't pull over immediately. At the last possible second, he finally exited the freeway. When he pulled up to the red light outside my mom's apartment complex, I didn't wait. The moment the car stopped, I threw the door open and ran. I don't think my feet touched the ground more than twice before I was inside. Once inside, I tried to explain everything to my mom, but she was more focused on the fact that I had taken an edible than the terrifying part of the story. The next morning, after I was clear-headed, I explained everything in detail, showed her the recordings, and we both filed a report with Uber. I still use ride shares occasionally, but never again when I'm alone, and definitely never while impaired. That night taught me how fast things can spiral when you're not in full control of your senses. And to this day, I swear the universe waits until I'm high to throw this kind of stuff at me.
I hate my life. I hate being a father. I hate what my life has turned into. And the worst part? I saw it coming and still went along with it. I never truly wanted children. I wasn't entirely against the idea at first, but deep down, I always knew it wasn't for me. When I got married, I was honest with my wife. Maybe one kid, but no more. That was my limit. But then our friends started having kids, and I saw the truth. It looked miserable. Even the parents of easy kids seemed worn out. The joy they talked about felt forced, fake. They were always tired, stressed, and secretly falling apart. Their perfectly curated social media lives only confirmed what I suspected. Parenthood is a trap. Then, out of nowhere, my wife's sister died. It changed everything. Suddenly, family became her highest priority. I understood her grief, but it awakened something in her that I couldn't relate to. She started talking about legacy, grandkids for her parents, honoring her sister's memory. I told her I still didn't want kids, but she wouldn't let it go. She wore me down. Then her parents stepped in. They painted a dream. Sell the ranch, move close to us, support us fully. You won't be alone. We'll help. Just be the provider. We'll handle the rest. Like a fool, I believed it. They sold me the fairy tale. Happy dinners, first steps, Christmas mornings, school plays. They left out the screaming, the bitterness, the constant sacrifices. I ignored my instincts and let myself be manipulated. We had a son. The early years were rough, but I kept telling myself it was just a phase. He screamed nonstop, barely slept, defied everything, even as a toddler. I kept waiting for things to get better. They never did. Eventually, he was diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder.
If you don't know, it's basically a clinical way of saying your kid defaults to no, not because of trauma or processing issues, just because. He fights, resists, escalates everything. He's vindictive, cruel, always pushing limits. He's 11 now, and the diagnosis feels like a life sentence. Every day is a battlefield. And the grandparents who promised support? Gone. Too much, they said. They stepped away when he was 4 and never came back in a meaningful way. Tonight was the breaking point. I came home after 6 days straight at work to find my son spitting on the neighbor's doorknob. Why? Because they took too long to return an Amazon package accidentally delivered to their house. I told him that wasn't okay. I didn't yell, just calmly corrected him. He stormed upstairs, opened the attic, and urinated all over the only box of childhood memories I had left. Photos, letters, mementos from my parents, both of whom died before I turned 20. He destroyed the one thing that felt sacred in my life. For no reason. So now I'm sitting in my car, alone, in a dark park, glued to my phone. I don't know if I'm going home tonight. I don't even know if I want to. This isn't a cry for help. I don't need advice. Don't tell me it's about parenting styles or discipline. I've tried everything. Books, therapy, behaviorists, coaches, specialists, reward charts, consequences, gentle parenting, tough love. Nothing worked. The only consistent element in all this, me, and my own weakness. That's the most painful part. I knew I didn't want this life, and I let myself be dragged into it anyway. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken, let guilt and emotional manipulation keep me in place. Now I'm 45, crying in my car, mourning the life I never got to live. My marriage is hanging by a thread. My wife, who once swore we'd face this as a team, is emotionally drained. Sometimes I feel like a stranger in my own home. The resentment is so deep I can barely look at her without hearing her broken promise. You'll never have to do this alone. But I am alone. I hate what my life has become. I hate that I lost my freedom, my peace, my sense of self. I hate that I let myself box into a role I was never meant to play. I hate how it's aged me, how I'm less patient, less kind, less human than I used to be. And yes, I hate my son, or at least what he represents. He didn't ask to be born, but he's the embodiment of every bad decision I ever made, and I hate myself for resenting him. But where do I put that guilt? There's no outlet, no safe place to say any of this. So I bury it. And every year, it gets harder to keep buried. If you're still unsure about having kids, let me say this clearly. If you're not completely sure, don't do it. Don't do it because your partner wants to. Don't do it for your parents. Don't do it thinking you'll grow into it. You won't. And the price of being wrong? Everything. Your time, your money, your marriage, and your sanity. It's irreversible. Not a rough patch, not a phase. It's a lifelong 24/7 commitment. And when it goes wrong, it's hell. And if the people who promise to help abandon you, you'll be left alone to pick up the pieces. That's my story. It's not just that I hate my life, that much is obvious. It's that I could have avoided all of this. I saw the red flags, I felt the doubt, and I said yes anyway. Because I was weak.
I was only 21 when my life changed in ways I could never have imagined. It all started with something simple: coming home late from work, stopping by a gas station and buying a lottery ticket, barely thinking twice about it. I didn't even check the numbers that night. The next morning, eating cold oatmeal in my tiny apartment, I casually looked up the results. That's when I realized I had just won the lottery. The payout was around $14 million. Most people would call that a blessing, a dream come true. And for many it is. But I can tell you now, at 33 years old, after keeping this secret for over a decade, winning the lottery didn't make my life richer. It made it lonelier. I live in one of the few states that allow you to claim lottery winnings anonymously. If that hadn't been the case, I don't think I could have kept it secret. But I did. I told no one, not my family, not my friends, not even coworkers. And that was a conscious decision. You see, I grew up poor. No, forget that. I grew up with nothing. My parents were textbook alcoholics, unstable, inattentive, and always broke. By the time I turned 18, I was already on my own. No support, no guidance, just me and the understanding that if I wanted anything more from life, I'd have to get it myself. So when I won, I didn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't want to share good news, but because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. My parents would suddenly show up with apologies and open hands. My two older cousins, who barely knew me, would appear with sob stories and fake smiles. As for my so-called friends, I'd seen how they acted when someone got even a little ahead. Jealousy oozed out them like poison. If they knew I had millions just sitting in a bank account, I'd never have a normal relationship again. And that's the part no one talks about. When you have money like this, you start seeing people differently. Every compliment feels manipulative. Every interaction feels transactional. That's what changed for me. People around me didn't change, but how I saw them did. And that made me question whether any of my relationships were ever real. I kept my boring, stable, middle-income job. It gave me cover. I bought a modest apartment and paid it off completely, told everyone it was a gift from a deceased relative. I got a Ducati, but said it was a big annual bonus. I even bought a small boat. My friends think I took out a loan for it. Some guys try to impress women by taking them out on the lake. I let them think whatever they want. It's easier that way. But the worst part is the paranoia. I don't flaunt the money, not because I'm humble, but because I'm terrified. Terrified that if someone starts digging, if they get suspicious, this whole carefully built illusion will collapse. And then what? Then I'm the guy who lied to everyone for years. And they'll resent me, not for winning, but for not telling them. But how could I tell anyone? How do you look a friend in the eye and say, yeah, when we were eating ramen in college together, I had 7 figures in my bank account? Or, remember when you couldn't afford rent and I didn't help? That was a choice. Because that's what it feels like, even if it wasn't that simple. Truth is, I have helped people, quietly, anonymously. I donated to my old school under a fake name so kids like me could afford school supplies. I paid off medical bills for strangers raising funds online. I even bought a car for a struggling single mom working 2 jobs. She thinks it was a dealership promo. I've tried to use the money for good, but none of it fixes the loneliness. None of it creates real connection. I haven't had a relationship last more than a few months and years because I can't trust anyone enough to share what's really going on in my life. You can't build love on a lie, but honestly, it might cost me everything. Some nights I wonder if I'll ever be able to tell anyone. Maybe someday I'll meet someone who makes me believe they'd love me even if I were broke. Or maybe I'll write a letter to be opened after I die, so the people I cared about will finally know the truth. That this secret life was never about money. It was about trust and how little I could afford to give. It's strange. People think the worst confessions are about crimes or sins, but sometimes the darkest secrets are the ones that look like blessings from the outside. The ones that force you to live such a carefully constructed life that even your closest friends don't really know who you are. So yeah, I won the lottery. But there are days I truly wish I were broke and anonymous again, instead of just pretending. Because pretending gets heavy over time. In 2009, I died. And that's not a metaphor. My heart literally stopped. My brain shut down for a time. The lights went out almost completely. And somehow, they turned them back on. I had a traumatic brain injury, so severe that, for 3 days, no one believed I'd survive. My family prepared for the worst, rightfully so. The doctors spoke in vague and grim terms. If there was any kind of miracle, they said later, I burned through every last ounce of it just to live. And I did live. But I didn't walk out of that hospital the same person who went in. I was someone completely different. When I say I live with permanent amnesia, I mean it in the most personal way imaginable. I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember my mother's voice or what her face looked like. For a while, I didn't even recognize my own reflection. The first 2 decades of my life felt like they belonged to someone else, completely gone. The hardest part wasn't losing the memories. It was living in a world where everyone else still had theirs. People would tell me stories that supposedly involved me, laugh about things we did together, ask if I remembered a person or a place, and all I could do was nod and smile. Because the truth was, no, I remembered nothing. And saying that out loud every single time, it was exhausting. It took me nearly 5 years to begin accepting that this was my new reality, that my past hadn't just vanished, it had been erased. But amnesia was only the beginning. As more time passed, I started to realize something else was wrong. I didn't feel fear, not like before, not the way I suppose most people do. A dog growls in my face. A car speeds toward me. Someone screams inches away. Nothing. No adrenaline spike. No cold sweat. No instinct to run. Just silence. As if my brain had forgotten how to respond to danger. It wasn't until I saw a neurologist again that things made sense. The amygdala, the part of my brain that processes fear, had been permanently damaged. It no longer warned me when I was in danger. It no longer triggered the body's survival response. Losing fear might sound liberating. Some people imagine it as a kind of superpower. But I'm here to tell you, it's not. It's a curse. Because fear is a boundary. It keeps us from reckless choices. It tells us when to stop, when to back off, when to protect ourselves. Without it, you start to wonder, what's left to hold me back? I lost more than fear. I lost emotional connection, to my then wife, most of all. It didn't happen instantly, but it was irreversible. I couldn't connect to her on that deep, intuitive level anymore. It was like watching someone cry through a pane of glass. You understand it, but you can't feel it. Eventually, the distance grew too wide. Our marriage collapsed. And honestly, it was unfair to her. I don't blame her for leaving. The emotions I can still feel now come in extremes. Love feels overwhelming. like obsession. When I care about someone, I want to shield them from everything, protect them, shelter them, never let them go. There's no middle ground. It's all or nothing. And anger? It's even worse. It simmers like lava and erupts without warning. I don't lash out physically. I don't scream. But I feel it. A pressure in my chest, like it's about to split open. My fists clench so tight, my knuckles pop. I often have to isolate myself just to calm down. I sit still, breathing through clenched teeth, gripping the edge of the table like it's the only thing keeping me grounded. I've never hit anyone, never raised a fist. I wish I could say I never would, but the truth terrifies me. Because if I ever did, I'm not sure I'd stop. That's why I hide it. Here's the real confession. Most people think I'm calm, composed, maybe a bit distant but still polite. What they don't see is the mental gymnastics I perform daily just to hold myself together, to not scare anyone, to appear normal, whatever that means. They don't know I monitor my emotions like a TSA agent on high alert, that I watch my tone, my facial expressions, my eye contact. They don't know about the 1,000-yard stare I get when I'm overwhelmed, and how I have to snap out of it before someone notices. I don't talk about any of this, not because I want pity, not because I want people to be afraid of me, and definitely not because I want them to think I'm unstable. Although, honestly, I probably am. At least a little. I think the reason I'm writing this now, posting it anonymously where no one knows my name or face, is to finally let go of the burden. To say, surviving something doesn't mean you walk away untouched. Sometimes, you survive by becoming someone else entirely. I know I'm not who I used to be. I don't even remember that person, but I try, every day. I try to be someone safe, someone who can love and listen and not let the darkness win. So, if you ever meet someone who seems a little strange, a little distant, maybe even a little tightly wound, just remember, they might be doing everything they can just to keep it together, the way I do every single day of my life.
This story takes place when I was about 16 years old. Because of my living situation, at least twice a month, I'd have to make a 2-hour drive from a city area back to my parents' house in a rural area. I'd say about an hour and a half of that drive was just country road, with nothing but valley, corn, or some other crop on either side, with the occasional farmhouse or something you might think people would go in and out of willingly. Because I was so used to this drive, I didn't think much of not having cell service or seeing any phone booths along the way. I mean, in all the times I'd been driving, nothing had happened yet, so surely nothing would ever happen, right? Well, in the middle of one of those drives back, while the night was slowly taking over, I saw a flash of light in the distance. That was weird. Maybe just a random moment. Then another flash. Maybe someone was coming this way and their high beams were acting up or something. And then another flash. All right, something's wrong. I slowed down a bit so I wouldn't get blinded and eased my car to the side of the road to try and figure out what was ahead. Further in the distance, I think I see a person. Actually, multiple people. My eyesight was fine at this point in my life,
So I started putting two and two together, getting close enough to realize there were 4 people on this country road, lined up across it as if to make a roadblock and prevent any cars from passing through. Another thing, I didn't see any car around them that they could have come in or stepped out of. I didn't remember any farmhouses or sheds nearby either. The rest of this encounter felt like it took place over an hour because of my fear and anxiety, but it was likely no more than 5 minutes in hindsight. I'm driving maybe 10 miles an hour now as I'm getting closer, and realizing that I'm definitely, without a doubt, approaching a line of 4 grown adults with huge, bright white masks on, staring in my direction. 2 of them definitely have bats or some other long, blunt objects. One person is holding something that the flashes are coming from. I've seen enough horror movies and heard enough stories about crimes on roads like this to know that in this moment, I only had 2 options. Slow down and hope they eventually part ways around my car, risking that they could very well get the jump on me and my dinky car. Pick up the pace and disregard whether or not they'd have the chance to move out of the way when I potentially accelerate through them. I decided on the latter. I had no means to protect myself other than a bat in the trunk of my car. At that time, I was a young teen who could easily get knocked down with a solid slap because of my build, and my car was trashy enough that if I stopped, I wouldn't doubt that someone could break in with ease. Now, hearing gravel and dirt kick up from under my tires, I was more freaked out at the potential that I could drive myself off the road, along with taking out some strangers who I was now dead certain were carrying bats. As I accelerated towards them, I was properly freaking out, but I had accepted that this was the decision I made. I accelerated more, and thankfully, the 2 that were directly in my way lunged out just in time not to get hit. I stopped accelerating to catch my breath, as if I needed to, and saw them in my rearview mirror. The 2 that didn't have to jump out of the way, for some reason, were now running toward my car like they thought they could catch up. And it became very real in that moment that these were people who were intentionally trying to get the jump on me in the middle of nowhere. Probably not just kids trying to get kids and giggles from freaking someone out, but real adults trying to harm someone who came that way. I focused on driving out of there as fast as I could. I didn't turn the radio back on to distract me, and felt shaken by the experience in general. The most messed up part, honestly, was getting home and realizing that part of what I was driving on wasn't just gravel. It was nails, now embedded in my tires. Praise whatever God may be out there for me somehow having sturdy-ass tires. I didn't tell my parents the full story about what happened. They just assumed I was being reckless and that someone was playing a prank by randomly scattering nails on the road. I told the story to some of my friends, and they told me I probably wasn't in any serious situation, and that those people were just trying to scare me. Being in a car gave me a pretty big advantage, which I can't deny. Still, it creeped the absolute hell out of me, and I remember it every single time I drive down a road that looks even remotely similar. This is something I add to the end of the story after telling it to friends before. This happened before the Purge movies came out. Otherwise, I might have felt a little more comfortable saying it wasn't creepy, just annoying or bothersome. Still wonder where they came from, though, since I very clearly remember there not being a car anywhere close by, nor any buildings around. I know that this experience was mostly in a car, But because of the proximity and the near intimate relation between my car and external human bodies, it definitely felt like a personal, creepy encounter, and I'll stand by that much, especially given the potential for direct one-on-one human interaction had I slowed down. I had to tell this one to someone other than my friends, since they've mostly heard the story. And I just had a nightmare about it again, just a night ago. I still don't know if I'm overreacting about the situation. All I know for sure is that those were definitely people, and I was definitely afraid for my life.
This happened a few years ago, and while the story isn't long, I still find myself wondering from time to time what could have happened that night. My girlfriend and I were at a pub not far from home, just having a few drinks. It was getting late, so we decided to walk back. On the way, we realized we were both pretty hungry and figured we'd stop by the gas station between the pub and our house to grab some snacks. It was a route we'd taken plenty of times before, nothing unusual. But this time was different. About halfway there, we heard footsteps behind us. When we turned to look, we saw a man about 50 meters back. In any other situation, he might have seemed normal, but something about him stood out. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, but his face looked worn and strange in the dim nightlight. His walk was long and unnatural. Something just felt off. We didn't stick around to judge. We simply picked up our pace. But right after we turned back around, the footsteps behind us grew louder. The vibe had completely changed. We weren't far from the gas station, so we figured we'd get there quickly, hoping that if this guy was planning something, he'd back off in a well-lit place with people around. As we walked faster, so did he. Eventually, we were practically jogging. I didn't look back, but I could feel that he was speeding up too, getting closer. That stretch of road had no streetlights, just darkness. That's why the gas station lights felt like such a relief when they finally appeared. We turned the corner and stepped inside, trying to calm down, and, of course, still planning to grab some snacks. But then he followed us in. He didn't say a word. He just stood there and stared at us the entire time. We took our time, hoping he'd get bored and leave. Eventually, he did, not buying anything, just staring and walking out. When we finished at the register and stepped outside, we saw him again, standing across the road, still watching us, right where we needed to walk to get home. That's when we called a cab instead. Nothing actually happened, but the feeling was so wrong. We'll never know what he wanted, but it definitely felt like he was targeting us. Maybe it's not the scariest story ever, but I'm just glad it didn't turn into something worse.
If my ex-wife and I divorced 6 years ago, it was nothing more than a painful but necessary reaction. We split custody of our 2 sons, now 9 and 13. In the years following the split, there was nothing between us except logistical arrangements and polite exchanges about the kids. Our lives ran in parallel, only intersecting for school events and handoffs. We lived just 2 miles apart, shared custody evenly, and that was it. But over the past year, something changed. She began acting differently, warmer, friendlier. She'd make small talk during pickups, comment on random details about the kids she usually kept to herself.
I found it odd, but didn't read into it. I wasn't interested in reconnecting, so I brushed it off. Then, things got stranger. It was Monday, my week with the boys. I picked them up from school, just like always. Around 8 p.m., I received a text from her. She thanked me for being a great father, said I was the only person she fully trusted with the kids, and asked me to tell them she loved them. That was unusual. Normally, she'd call our older son each night to say goodnight, but not that night. The next morning, driving to work, I passed her house like I always did. Her car was still there. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was working from home. But later, something felt off. I texted her about a book our son had left at her place. No reply. Hours passed. Nothing. I started to worry. If it was about the kids, she normally replied within minutes. I tried calling, straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to sound calm, saying if I didn't hear from her by 2 p.m., I'd stop by. I didn't know any of her friends. She kept her personal life private. Her parents lived out of state. Time dragged. My stomach turned. I left work early, drove to her place. The moment I arrived, I saw packages untouched on the porch. A red flag. She never left them out long. My anxiety grew. I knocked, rang the bell. Nothing. Then instinct took over. I let myself in, walked through the house, called her name, hoping she'd appear and brush off my panic. But when I reached the bedroom, I stopped. Cold. She was lying on the bed, silent, still. A dark stain spreading across her body. Something in her hand. At first, I thought it was a phone, but looking closer, I realized it wasn't. It was a gun. Then it became painfully clear. She had shot herself. I don't remember much after that. I called 911. Hours of questions. They contacted her parents, since I was no longer her next of kin. Somehow, through the fog, I still had to pick up the kids. I forced myself to wear a stone face, to push everything down, to be the father they expected. Inside, my mind was spinning. My older son started complaining that Mom wasn't answering his texts. He asked to go to her house, still sealed off as a crime scene. He thought she was ignoring her, or her phone was broken. He wanted to tell her to fix it. My heart ached. I knew I couldn't keep up the facade much longer. I went to his school, asked to speak privately with the principal. I explained my son would be missing school for the next week. The principal asked what was so important. I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. His mother just took her own life, and I haven't told him yet. Every day, my former mother-in-law called, begging to speak with the boys. I had to keep saying no. I hadn't told them. Everything was happening so fast, I hadn't even processed it myself. My older son senses something is wrong. He's always intuitive. Now my younger one is picking up on the tension too. He clings to me, refuses to let go. He doesn't understand, but he feels it. Something terrible has happened. This morning, he broke down in the car, begging me to tell him what's going on. I've made the decision. I'll tell them on Saturday. I need these last few days to prepare myself, because I know, once they know, their world will never be the same. My 13-year-old won't take it well. He's old enough to feel the full weight of this loss, to feel angry, heartbroken, in ways his younger brother might never grasp. Whatever pain I feel now, it's nothing compared to what I'll feel when I look into their eyes and tell them the truth. All these years after the divorce, I never thought I'd be the one delivering this kind of news. We grew so far apart, our lives so divided. And yet, here I am, holding her final secret, one that will shatter our children. I wish I could say I saw it coming, that I could have done something to stop it. Maybe if I'd paid closer attention to her new warmth, to the subtle changes in her behavior, maybe I would have realized she needed help. But I didn't. And now, all that's left is to pick up the pieces for our sons. In some ways, it feels like the divorce never ended. Her pain was always there, quiet, hidden, until it consumed her. And now that pain is here, with me, with our children, leaving us to carry the weight of her absence.
Sometimes, just walking past others, my heart would race. I'd wonder if I'd be caught. And honestly, a part of me almost wanted it, just to see what would happen. The stakes were high, and the danger made it all the more intoxicating. But lately, I've started to ask myself, how much longer can this go on? Deep down, I know it's only a matter of time before someone says something and everything collapses. I imagine Sarah discovering her husband has been secretly seeing men, or Jake realizing that the guy he's sneaking around with is the same one who's been with his wife. The fallout would be catastrophic, and maybe, in some twisted way, that's exactly why I'm still here. I want to see how far the chaos will go when the truth finally comes out. For now, I keep my double life hidden, carefully maneuvering through each encounter, savoring the forbidden thrill of my scandalous secret. I can't bring myself to give up either of them. Every moment feels like walking a razor's edge, dangerously close to slicing everything open and letting it all bleed out. Maybe one day I'll slip, or maybe I'll light the fire myself and walk away from the ashes. But until then, I stay, trapped in this dangerous little web, savoring each secret moment before the inevitable storm hits. 6 years ago, I became a mother. My son Josh has bright, curious eyes, an infectious laugh, and a gentle touch that calms me instantly. I adore him. But there are days, more than I'd like to admit, when I wonder, did I make the right choice bringing him into this world? Josh was born with Down syndrome. Since that day, life has felt like a delicate balancing act. During pregnancy, I had that hard conversation with the doctor. "It's a possibility," he said. "You have a choice." I couldn't imagine it. I already loved him so deeply. I believed I could handle anything. I thought love would be enough. But love doesn't shield you from hardship. It doesn't protect you from sleepless nights and the crushing loneliness. Life with Josh turned out to be nothing like I expected. His needs are complex. He requires constant supervision. Simple things like feeding or dressing are daily battles. Communication often feels like guesswork. We've tried everything: speech therapy, occupational therapy, early intervention. And though there's progress, every win is followed by setbacks. It's like climbing a mountain in the dark. And then there's the isolation. In the beginning, we were surrounded with support, friends, family, promises. But eventually, silence. People pulled away. I understand. It's hard for them. But it doesn't make the loneliness any easier. I watch other kids learning to read, playing with friends, talking about crushes, and I feel envy. moments I might never share with my son. My marriage is another casualty. We're no longer a team, just two exhausted parents coordinating appointments and therapies. At night, we lie in bed, separate in spirit, bound only by exhaustion. Even Emma, our daughter, has become part of this struggle. She loves her brother, but she's already taken on a caretaker role far too early. And then there's fear. Fear for Josh's future, for how the world will treat him, for the pain he might feel when he realizes he's different. I want to protect him, but it's too late. Sometimes, in the dark, the thought rises, did I make the right choice? I love him with everything in me, but love doesn't erase guilt. It doesn't ease the burden. I'm telling this now because I have no one else to tell. I will keep fighting for his best life, but the weight of this choice, I will carry it forever.
You would be shocked at how willingly people trust a stranger armed with just a rubber squeegee. 5 long years. That's how long I worked as a professional window cleaner in a small, almost forgotten Swedish town. A town where doors are left unlocked, keys hidden under doormats, and strangers are welcomed as if they're part of the family. On paper, the job was simple: clean the windows and move on. And most days, that's exactly what I did. Mornings began with coffee at the warehouse, quick assignments, and heading out. Our boss shuffled us around like cards, forcing us to work side by side, but sometimes I was lucky. Given solo jobs, when the house was empty, silence, solitude, and a short note. Key under the mat. Thank you, those were my sacred moments, alone with someone else's life. It wasn't darkness, but not quite light. Something else, something hard to put into words. I don't know what that says about me. Probably nothing good, but the moment I realized I was alone in the house, a thrill, a tension stirred inside me. I'd start with the windows, fast, careful, flawless. Then place the ladder by the front door, in case someone came back early. And then, the real risk began. I'd snoop, not steal, never, just explore. A curiosity burning inside, pulling me toward a line I probably should never cross. Opening cupboards, drawers, closets, memorizing where everything belonged so I could put it back without a trace. You wouldn't believe what people hide and what they leave out in the open. A diary in the linen closet where a woman wrote about cheating on her husband with her boss. Doubts about whether the child she carried was even his. A teenager's laptop left open on Pornhub. No password, as if planning to come back later, never imagining someone like me would see it. Sex toys in nightstands, unfinished letters, a loaded pistol under a mattress, almost unimaginable in Sweden. In one couple's bedroom, there were full-size sex swings, no shame, like a regular chair or lamp. They either knew I'd come or didn't expect me to enter the bedroom. Or maybe they didn't care. Maybe they wanted me to see. Each house had its own mood, cold and sterile, or cluttered and alive, filled with love, chaos, or both. And I sat in the front row, an invisible spectator. I had a ritual. Start with the bathroom. People leave their most honest selves there. Prescriptions, habits, notes on mirrors, then bedrooms. If lucky, children's rooms too. Once I found a ninja star made from 3 kitchen knives crafted by a boy. It stuck in my mind. I never thought I was doing anything right. I knew it was wrong. But I didn't take anything. I just watched, learned, and that learning became a drug. I sought out solo jobs, changed routes, feigned sickness to avoid partners, all for another story. One house stands out, an elderly couple. They left the key and note as usual. The house frozen in the 70s, brown wallpaper, a bathroom rug, yellowed kitchen appliances. But what struck me most were the letters, dozens in a shoebox attic, all from the man to a woman named Ellen, written during the war, full of longing, regret, and love. But Ellen wasn't his wife. She was someone else, someone he never forgot. And yet he spent his old age with another woman, not Ellen, I left that house feeling torn in two. Sometimes I think of him, smiling over coffee with his wife, his heart locked away in a box above the insulation. I didn't just clean windows, I stole stories. Silently, like the best thief you could imagine. I was never caught. No one came home early, no cameras. But the risk, that was the thrill. The chance of being exposed, of being understood, that I wasn't just washing glass, I was peeking behind the curtain. Like any addiction, it became harder to justify. I began asking myself, what am I searching for? Secrets? Shame? Proof that we're all as broken inside as I sometimes feel? Eventually, I quit. Not because I was caught, nor because of enlightenment. I just felt I'd had enough. Or maybe, deep down, I was afraid I'd cross a line I couldn't come back from. I never told a soul, until now. To you, the lucky ones, I don't think I'm a bad person, but I know what I did was wrong. And the scariest part, I can't promise I wouldn't do it again, if given the chance. Because somewhere inside me lives a sick, insatiable curiosity, and it won't let go. So if you ever hid a key under the mat, if you paid someone to work in your home while you were away, I hope I made you think. Because not every window cleaner comes just to clean glass. Some of us come to look behind it. I no longer know who this person beside me really is. And to be honest, I'm not sure I ever did. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't want to hear that I did the right or wrong thing. I just need to say this out loud, because inside it's eating me alive. I never imagined I would become the wife of an addict. I dreamed of a peaceful life, of stability and safety. I wanted my children to grow up in love, not fear. I didn't want to count coins for food. But somehow I ended up living the exact life I tried so hard to avoid. We met through a friend. She told me he was a good guy. What she didn't mention, at least not right away, for when in das, was that they met in rehab. He's clean, she said, and back then he was. He was charming, attentive, said the right things at the right time. He made me feel loved, needed, and I fell for it, fast, blind, and deep. I ignored the mood swings, the unstable jobs. I silenced the anxiety because I believed in the version of him that love painted. We got married while I was still in school. I worked night shifts. He jumped from one job to another. When he was sober, he was gentle, even sweet. But the sober moments kept getting shorter. First, weed, then pills, then heroin. I was pregnant when I first found a syringe in our apartment. He cried, begged me to forgive him, swore it was just once. I believed him. And that was the first of many lies I chose to believe. Then our son was born. I was studying, raising 2 children, and living with a man who disappeared for days and came back exhausted, cold, sometimes violent. He threw things, screamed. Once he shoved me while I was holding our son. I hit the wall and fell. And then he cried again, begged for forgiveness, blamed the drugs. We ran out of money. It all went into his addiction. We lost our home. Ended up living in an old van. No heat, no comfort, nothing but despair. My daughter cried every night for her room. My son clung to me like he could sense we were drowning. I tried to keep us afloat, but I was already sinking. Then came the night that changed everything. He was off. I could feel it. We whispered, fought as the kids tried to sleep. I found a syringe in his coat but didn't even bring it up. And then he pulled a gun on me. Small, maybe, but when it's pointed at your face, size doesn't matter. My son was in my arms, my daughter was behind me, curled up. I froze in terror, and something inside me broke. This wasn't love anymore, this was fear. I realized he could kill us. Maybe not on purpose, but in his fog of rage and drugs. It didn't matter. I didn't call the cops. I didn't believe it would save us. We were trapped. Days later, he overdosed again. I'd seen it before, twice. I had Narcan. I knew what to do. But I hesitated. I sat with the first aid kit in my hands and thought how easy it would be to do nothing. Just let it end. No more screaming, no more hiding, no more fear. But I couldn't. Not because I loved him, that was gone, but because I couldn't live with the guilt of doing nothing. So I did what I had to. I saved him again. He woke up. No, thank you. No recognition, just rolled over and passed out. And I cried because I had just given my captor another lease on life. Nothing changed. We're still in that van. He's still using, still screaming, still dragging us all down. I hold on the best I can. I cook, feed the kids, look for work, look for housing, look for hope. And he tells me I'm lucky he's still here. And you know, I find myself staring at that first aid kit more and more. I know this will happen again, and I know I'll save him again, because I'm not ready to carry the weight of letting him die. But every time I save him, something inside me cracks, something in me fades away. I'm not a hero, I'm not strong, I'm just stuck, trapped with someone who's already gone, trapped in fear, duty, and a tiny, stupid hope that maybe one day I'll break free, without breaking myself completely.